Orders of the day.
Orders of the day, ordre du jour, government orders, government bills, Senate, resuming consideration at report stage of Bill S7, Zero Tolerance for Barbaric Cultural Practices Act.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Beaches East York.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm standing today at report stage on this Bill S7 before us with this very unfortunate short title of the Zero Tolerance for Barbaric Cultural Practices Act. I stand in opposition to the main motion, Mr. Speaker, and in support of the NDP's proposed amendments to the bill. Mr. Speaker, I want to stress that I support the intent of this bill. No woman or child should be subject to any form of violence, and certainly not the forms of gender-based violence such as forced marriages, polygamy, and underage marriages that this bill purports to address. Further, Mr. Speaker, the fact of these forms of gender-based violence in Canadian society is not in dispute here, and neither is the fact that there are things that we can do and ought to do to prevent and respond to the practices in issue. But, Mr. Speaker, this bill is not the appropriate response and needs at a minimum to be amended because it threatens to aggravate, not help, existing circumstances and further victimize or re-victimize those subject to the practices that the bill purports to address. The precautionary principle ought to apply here, Mr. Speaker. The Conservative government has heard enough from enough knowledgeable people on the matter of this bill, from those with experience and expertise in these matters, to stop this here, to take a step back and rethink its approach to this issue before it does more harm than good to people who need help. Here are the main provisions of the bill, Mr. Speaker. It amends the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act to make polygamy grounds for inadmissibility or removal from Canada for immigrants and permanent residents if there are reasonable grounds to believe that these individuals have practiced, are practicing, or may in future practice polygamy. It amends the Civil Marriage Act to make free and enlightened consent to marriage a legal requirement and to require that any previous marriage be dissolved or declared null before a new marriage is contracted, and to make 16 years of age the minimum legal age for marriage. It amends the Criminal Code to clarify that it is an offence for an officiant to knowingly solemnize a marriage in contravention of federal law, to make an offence to celebrate, aid, or participate in a marriage rite or ceremony knowing that one of the persons being married is doing so against their will or is under the age of 16, to make an offence to remove a child from Canada in order to marry a child against their will or if the child is under 16, to allow a judge to issue a peace bond for a period of up to 2 years if a person is suspected on reasonable grounds of preparing to force someone else to marry a child or to remove a child from Canada for one of these purposes, and to address the issue of so-called honour killings to limit the defence of provocation to circumstances in which the victim engaged in conduct that would constitute an indictable offence under the Criminal Code that's punishable by 5 years or more in prison. But, Mr. Speaker, stakeholders and expert witnesses have testified before the Senate Standing Committee on Human Rights and the House of Commons Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration that this bill is also likely to have many and serious unintended consequences. For example, the bill makes no provision to allow women who are conditional permanent residents to remain in Canada if their polygamous partner is deported. There is no clear definition of polygamy, leading likely to confusion and potentially arbitrary decisions regarding deportation and inadmissibility and discrimination against nationals from certain countries. UNICEF has expressed concerns, Mr. Speaker, that the bill would criminalize minors who celebrate, aid, or participate in forced marriages, and UNICEF has recommended exemptions for children and young people from certain provisions in the bill. Criminalization in the context of family and social relations, Mr. Speaker, may end up simply driving these practices underground. In all of this, Mr. Speaker, the bill falls in a long line of socially insensitive, ham-fisted and unsophisticated responses to complex social issues by this Conservative government. In March 2012, for example, the Conservatives introduced new measures to crack down on marriage fraud, including the requirement for a sponsored spouse to live with their sponsor for 2 years or face deportation and possible criminal charges. Clearly, Mr. Speaker, this measure leaves women reluctant to report abuse because they fear losing permanent residency and consequently vulnerable to abuse. In April 2014, a Conservative member from Mississauga South introduced a motion which purported to deal with forced marriages by banning marriages by proxy or telephone, for example, from qualifying for spousal sponsorship. But, Mr. Speaker, distance marriages of this sort are largely conducted by refugees, and so we have the consequence that this motion would serve to limit family reunification rather than limit forced marriages. These are the kinds of sensitivities, nuances, understandings, etc., missing from the Conservative government's worldview, and it's problematic, Mr. Speaker. And beyond that, and just as egregiously, Mr. Speaker, this Conservative government forgoes opportunities to even consider, much less heed, the advice of those who actually understand the complexity of these issues. For example, during the House of Commons Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration study on strengthening the protection of women in our immigration system, most witnesses insisted on the fact that newcomers must be informed in their language of origin and before coming to Canada of their rights in Canada and the resources available to them in Canada. Although the committee recommended in its report to the House of Commons, quote, that the Government of Canada expand pre-arrival orientation to ensure sponsored spouses receive information in a language they understand and to ensure that the topics covered include gender equality, women's rights, their legal rights, what constitutes abuse in Canada, and how to seek help, end quote. No funds were earmarked in the 2015 budget to implement this recommendation. Herein is another example, Mr. Speaker, of the government ignoring expertise, foregoing data and information, and in so doing, putting people at risk, sacrificing vulnerable people on the altar of political expediency. And I call it political expediency quite deliberately, Mr. Speaker, because the truth here is that so much of what's in this bill actually duplicates existing laws. For example, the bill amends the Civil Marriage Act to make free and enlightened consent legal requirements for marriage, but these requirements already exist as part of the Civil Code of Quebec and common law in other provinces. The bill limits the defense of provocation ostensibly to exclude honor killings, but courts have already ruled that the concept of honor and a culturally driven sense of what is an appropriate response do not count as provocation under the criminal code. Canadian Criminal Code already provides recourse relevant in most cases involving forced marriages prior to and after marriage, as well as in cases of traveling with a minor with the intent to force them to marry. There's a broad range, Mr. Speaker, of existing criminal code provisions, including everything from intimidation to forcible confinement to sexual assault, that deal with these issues already. So much of what we're talking about here today, Mr. Speaker, here in this House stands as so fully representative of the 4 years of the 41st Parliament and the style and substance of this Conservative government. They take complex social issues with real victims and respond the only way they seem to know how, with their reflex to criminalization, without regard to evidence, experience, or expertise, or the potential of the unintended consequences of their reflex. Witness their response to the over 1,200 missing and murdered Indigenous women. No inquiry, no search for intelligence or understanding, just criminalize as though that helps victims, as though that's somehow going to prevent having more victims. And with so few days left in the 41st Parliament, Mr. Speaker, this elected chamber is here considering a bill put forward by a chamber of unelected people. We have a Conservative government giving priority or ceding priority to an ill-considered, reactionary, and potentially harmful bill from the unelected Senate, while at the same time shutting down debate in this elected chamber, as they've done 100 times already, as has been the fate of nearly 60 bills to date on matters that elected representatives of this chamber want to debate. In all, Mr. Speaker, what a fitting way for this government to close out the final days of this Parliament, and what an unfortunate way for Canada and Canadians. Thank you.
Questions and comments? Question and commentary. The honourable member for Trinity Spadina.
I listened with care to my colleague's question, and the question, I guess, is this. I'm struggling to find out in this bill something which already isn't illegal. It's almost like we're making it illegal twice because we hate it so much. And in doing so, we're ignoring, I think, what is the real cruelty in the current legislation that governs marriage, in particular marriage that spans the globe, is that families have had their separation extended from 11 to 29 months almost arbitrarily. I was in a restaurant on Queen Street in my riding, and a young chef came out from the back of a fast food restaurant and said, what happened? My spouse was told that she'd have to wait 11 months to come to this country. I just checked the website. It's 29 months. I'm not very familiar with the cultural customs on the Barbary Coast from 1,500 years ago, but that to me seems like a cruel practice, and yet that's legal in this country to make young people suffer like that, and yet all the steps in this bill simply make what's illegal already illegal twice. It's like they like it so much they thought doing it twice would make it even more of a vice.
The honourable member for Beaches East York.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Appreciate the question, and this is certainly a habit that this government has of not paying attention, in fact, to the criminal provisions that already exist in the Canadian Criminal Code across a broad range of issues, and putting forth legislation in this House that duplicates existing provisions as though these things aren't already taken care of. And what's most problematic is not just the reflex to criminalization, Mr. Speaker, but the insensitivity to the fact that when you deal with matters of family and social relations through criminalization or immigration only, you are inevitably capturing in your web family issues and doing harm to families. So at committee, for example, there were experts, Mr. Speakers, talking about this issue, and Dr. Hanana Siddiqui, for example, head of policy and research at Southall Black Sisters in London, the United Kingdom, said anything that you introduce around immigration is not going to affect just the perpetrator, but the whole family, the women and children in that polygamous relationship, and that can have detrimental effects on them as well. And according to Avi Go, director of the Metro Toronto Chinese and Southeast Asian Clinic, the bill seeks to deport people who are engaged in polygamy, and that would include the very women that the government claims to be trying to protect. These are the unintended consequences, Mr. Speaker, and the insensitivities that I talk about in my speech. Thank you.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Nickel Belt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my colleague from Beaches East York for his wonderful speech on this matter. I would appreciate it if the member from Beaches East York could tell us a little bit about the amendments that were suggested by the NDP at committee and rejected.
The honourable member for Beaches East York.
Well, I thank the member for that question. He will recall, Mr. Speaker, that at second reading, the NDP actually put forward a motion in response to this bill that was rejected. It was a comprehensive motion, Mr. Speaker, that was intended to capture a whole bunch of issues that this bill and its reflex to criminalization did not capture. And the issues, Mr. Speaker, dealt with the need for support for families, for social services. Repeatedly, we see that these things aren't dealt with by the government. It's a bill that is missing, for example, the social supports required for people caught up in a web of domestic violence. It omits, for example, as UNICEF has called for, the educational support, mental health services that people need caught in these circumstances. And most critically, Mr. Speaker, we hear this time and time again, this is a bill that is missing, and also we had a budget, Mr. Speaker, tabled not long ago by this government that is missing anything with respect to affordable housing. Affordable housing, Mr. Speaker, is cited by many as the single most important factor in permitting women and children to escape circumstances of domestic violence and abuse. And there's nothing in the Conservative budget to deal with affordable housing. There's nothing to deal with that practical response here in this bill. And the amendments proposed by the NDP are intended to build into this bill, Mr. Speaker, some of those critical supports for people caught in these cultural practices. Thank you.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Yellowhead.
Mr. Speaker, I am grateful for the opportunity to participate in this debate on Bill S7, the Zero Tolerance for Barbaric Cultural Practices Act. This bill proposes to amend the Immigration and Refugees Protection Act, the Civil Marriage Act, and the Criminal Code. The amendments proposed in Bill S7 would provide more protection and support for vulnerable individuals, most especially women and children. The passage of Bill S7 would render permanent and temporary residence inadmissibility if they practice polygamy in Canada. It would strengthen Canadian marriage laws by establishing a new national minimum age for marriage of 16 years and by codifying the existing legal requirements for free and enlightened consent for marriage and for ending an existing marriage prior to entering another. Criminalize certain conduct related to underage and forced marriage ceremonies, including the act of removing a child from Canada for the purpose of such marriages. It would help protect potential victims of underage or forced marriages by creating a new specific court-ordered peace bond where there are grounds to fear someone would commit an offence in this area, and ensure that the defence of provocation could not be used in so-called honour killings and many spousal homicides. Mr. Speaker, by undertaking these measures, supports the government's throne speech commitment to ensure that barbaric cultural practices do not occur on Canadian soil. Women seeking a better life for themselves and their families in Canada should never be subject to constant fear and threat of violence or death simply for living their lives and pursuing better opportunities for themselves. Practices that include early and forced marriages, polygamy, and any so-called honour-based violence run counter to Canadian values and democratic norms. They often contravene basic human rights, especially subjecting women and girls to brutal and inhumane treatment. The negative impacts these have on families and society in general range from the influencing of immigration outcomes to reducing opportunities for integration and success, while also limiting the free choice of vulnerable women and children. In addition, we know that there are additional barriers for immigration and newcomer women and girls who wish to protect themselves and seek help. We want to ensure that help and protection is available if and when they need it. Mr. Speaker, I would like to speak on one specific measure proposed by Bill S7. I would like to focus the remainder of my time on the provision that aims to augment tools that currently exist to counter the practice of polygamy. As we know, polygamy has been illegal in Canada for 125 years. For many years, we have recognized in this country that this practice is an affront to Canadian values. Polygamous marriages are not legally valid in Canada and are currently prohibited in the Criminal Code. As well, the Immigration and Refugees Protection Act already specifies that polygamous spouses cannot be sponsored. When we upheld Canada's criminal law ban on the practice of polygamy, the Honourable Chief Justice Bauman of British Columbia Supreme Court recognized the harms, physical, psychological, and social, associated with the practice of polygamous marriages. For these reasons, it remains against the criminal law in Canada to practice polygamy or to enter into a polygamous union. While the responsibility for the prosecution of most crimes, including polygamy, rests with the provincial attorney generals, the prohibition in criminal code upheld in 2011 is the responsibility of this cabinet. In turn, this Parliament and Government of Canada also has jurisdiction over immigration laws and their enforcement. Since polygamy does occur in some countries from which Canada draws immigrants, we need to ensure that our immigration system has the necessary tools to counter it. Mr. Speaker, Bill S7 would give us these additional tools. Bill S7 would create a new ground of inadmissibility in the Immigration and Refugees Protection Act for practicing polygamy, increasing our ability to prevent polygamy from occurring on Canadian soil, and ensuring that the immigration system is not enabling this practice in any way. The bill would give immigration officers enhanced tools with which to render both temporary and permanent residents inadmissibility for practicing polygamy. The new inadmissibility would mean that those in polygamous marriages abroad wanting to enter Canada on a temporary basis would only be able to enter this country alone without their spouses. Those who cease to practice polygamy would, of course, no longer be inadmissible. It also means that permanent residents found to be practicing polygamy could lose their status and be removed from Canada on that basis alone. Further, we would no longer need a criminal conviction or a finding of misrepresentation in order to begin removal procedures. Mr. Speaker, we know that more needs to be done to protect women and girls in our immigration system, despite all of our government's best efforts and intentions. That's why it's so important that the measures in Bill S7, including the additional measures I have discussed regarding polygamy, are enacted. If passed, they would strengthen our laws to protect Canadians and newcomers to Canada from barbaric cultural practices. This bill sends a clear message to anyone coming to Canada that such practices are not acceptable and run counter to our principles of freedom, democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. The Zero Tolerances for Barbaric Cultural Practices Act stands up for immigrant women and girls who have come to Canada for a better life and better opportunities, ensuring that they have every chance to succeed and make their own choices about the way they want to live their lives. As legislators, it's our responsibility to prevent those practices that abuse vulnerable women and children, such as polygamy, from happening on our Canadian soil. Mr. Speaker, by ensuring the passage into law of the Zero Tolerance for Barbaric Cultural Practices Act, we will be taking a major step towards the goal by increasing the Government of Canada's ability to prevent polygamy from occurring in this country. I strongly encourage all members to join me in supporting Bill 7. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? L'honorable député de
The Honourable Member for Pierrefonds-Dollard. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my colleague for his remarks. We sit together on the Citizenship and Immigration Committee, so we were involved in the same study, and I'm surprised that he did not refer to the several witnesses who expressed their concerns about this Bill S7. If he recalls, everyone agreed to support the intent. So everyone agreed with the intent of the bill to protect women, but the debate was surrounding certain aspects of the bill that could end up putting some victims at risk and even making them more vulnerable. So there were people, experts who had worked in the field, who work with these victims on a daily basis, and they were saying, be cautious, because this might encourage victims to not seek out assistance, or it may lead to women being deported, for example, or be afraid of being deported if they speak about what is happening to them. So it's surprising that he didn't refer to it, because he heard these experts himself. There were lawyers here appeared. There are experts, legal experts, who appeared before the committee. And they are experts on the criminal code as well. And they said that there are terms that are not defined well enough that could be misinterpreted. And there are many aspects that could actually harm and worsen the situation, and there are already provisions in the criminal code that cover some of these practices. Does my colleague remember these experts raising their concerns, and why did he not refer to them in his speech?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the honourable member for that question. Mr. Speaker, I did hear those arguments coming from our witnesses, but we had many witnesses there. But I take into consideration the statements made by people such as Aruna Pop, who says it's about time. I commend the government on its leadership and for taking a stand on a very difficult issue in defending the human rights of vulnerable women unable to speak for themselves. She's a victim. I listened to her. I listened to many victims. I listened to many lawyers. I listened to many other people. People will always argue on the rights and wrongs, but I believe this act is the right act for Canada and for the women and children in this country.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Trinity Spadina.
Thanks. I listened to the member talk about the needs of victims to be addressed in a proactive manner, to craft legislation and craft government action to try and prevent victimization as opposed to simply respond to victimization, to simply respond to a problem, but to actually anticipate the problem, put in place the measures needed to protect people ahead of them being harmed as opposed to simply tracking the perpetrators afterwards. And if that's the value system, and if that's the approach to solving legal challenges and moral dilemmas in this country, why on God's earth are 1,200 missing and murdered Indigenous women being responded to with a data bank for DNA instead of housing, investments in education, investments in Aboriginal and First Nations, Métis and Inuit communities? Why, if proactive action is the order of the day, is this government so silent on 1,200 Canadian women who are missing and is unacceptably tolerated by this House?
The honourable member for Yellowhead.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member for that question, but I'm not exactly sure where he wanted me to go with that. But on the first part of it, and I'm only going to deal with the first part, is what have we done to protect these people prior? Let's look at the CIC-funded organization. It provides targeted programming to these individuals. In addition, special language programs are available for immigration and refugee women to understand the thing. Both Canadian Citizens Study Guide, Discover Canada, and the Welcome to Canada Orientation Guide explain the rights of the newcomers to Canada. It also explains the rights and wrongs, what we expect in Canada, what we tolerate in Canada. CIC also disseminates a brochure, information for sponsored spouses or partners. We are actively participating in meeting with immigrants coming to this Canada before they come even to Canada. We make sure that they see the information that they need so they understand what the laws are in Canada and how they can protect themselves when they arrive here.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I, too, would like to be able to share some thoughts in regards to Bill S7. The Liberal Party will be supporting Bill S7. We have expressed, and I've even had opportunity in the past to stand and express a great deal of concern in terms of the titling of the bill, but there are aspects of the legislation that do warrant support, and therefore the Liberal Party will in fact be supporting the bill. But let me pick up on an issue that my colleague from Toronto, Spadina, just made reference to, and that is the 1,200, that's 1,200 plus murdered and missing First Nation, Aboriginal women and girls, Mr. Speaker, and the lack of action. Now, I bring it up, and I suspect my colleague brought it up, because if you take a look at this piece of legislation that we have before us, it attempts to deal with gender-based violence, Mr. Speaker, or biases. And we need to emphasize that every society has some form of gender-based violence. This is one of the reasons why we oppose the naming or the short title of the legislation in itself, which has a lot more to do with the spin that the Prime Minister's office wants to see than it does in terms of what Canadians want to see, Mr. Speaker. And that is the reason why, for a bizarre, many would suggest racial-based reason and rationale, that they incorporated the zero tolerance for barbaric, and then they threw in the word culture, Mr. Speaker, and this is something that has offended many people in every region of our country, many different stakeholder groups and so forth, because of this government's attitude towards culture, Mr. Speaker. And when we talk about the violence and exploitation that takes place, as I say, every society has some form of gender-based violence. And that's why when we look at, even here in Canada, what you'll do, Mr. Speaker, is you will find that time and time again, I am one of the members of Parliament, and only one, Mr. Speaker, that has raised the issue of the First Nations, Aboriginal women and girls that have been murdered and missing over the years. In fact, Mr. Speaker, many of those young ladies and girls actually come or at one point were in Winnipeg North, Mr. Speaker.
Order. The honourable member for Winnipeg North has the floor. The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
I will allow the New Democratic member of Parliament to reflect in terms and maybe read what it is I said, and I'm sure he'll answer his own question and assertion in terms of what I've just said. And I indicated that there have been many members of Parliament. If the member would listen a little closer, maybe he would be better informed. Mr. Speaker, the issue is of critical importance, and we have raised the issue and will continue to do so, Mr. Speaker. The government has been found wanting on that very important issue. But before us today is S7. And in dealing with S7, Mr. Speaker, there are, as I say, aspects in which we can be supportive of it. And maybe if I can just spend a minute or two on that first, Mr. Speaker. You know, polygamous marriages. I don't think that there's or I would suggest to you there would be very few individuals that would call Canada home that would support that, Mr. Speaker. It is, in fact, a barbaric practice, something that defies what we believe are Canadian values. Forced marriages, again, is something in which is something that is completely unacceptable based on Canadian values. The idea of establishing a marriage or a set age, a minimum age for marriage, again, is something, and making it very clear, Mr. Speaker, is something that can be very supportive. As many Canadians, again, would respond quite negatively to the idea of a 12-year-old girl being married off, Mr. Speaker. And this is one of the reasons, again, why there is some value in terms of the clarity that the legislation does bring to the criminal code. So that, along with, and I would emphasize again, the fourth point, in which it is domestic violence, and domestic violence, again, is something that goes against Canadian values, and therefore I would suggest to you, Mr. Speaker, that even though the title of the bill, and there are other concerns, other members have raised concerns in regards to the legislation, they will find that there is value in terms of supporting the bill. The name is something in which I've made reference to, and this is where we get the greatest amount of issue with the legislation, Mr. Speaker. I talk about the Prime Minister and his office, and it's not the first time where we have seen these names being drawn up, Mr. Speaker, in order to appeal to the public at large, as opposed to what makes sense for the legislation itself, Mr. Speaker. I have asked numerous questions on behalf of the Liberal Party, and other members have asked in regards to why it is the government has chosen to incorporate the word culture in the title. The actual short title of the bill, Mr. Speaker, is Zero Tolerance for Barbaric Cultural Practices Act. We know, Mr. Speaker, through canvassing and talking with stakeholders and talking with a good number of Canadians, that the incorporation of the word culture is just not necessary. Yet, we believe that the Prime Minister, through his office, has instructed that this name be the name that be tagged with the legislation, and it's at a fairly significant cost, Mr. Speaker. All we do know is that the government at times wants to give impressions that many would interpret as being of a racial nature. Whether it's this piece of legislation, we were here yesterday in terms of the question period where the Liberal critic from immigration questioned comments that were being expressed by the Minister of Immigration and questioning why it is the government chooses many of the words that it chooses in order to be able to sensationalize, and that's what it is, Mr. Speaker, sensationalize certain issues which ultimately do have a fairly negative impact, Mr. Speaker, on racial tolerance, if I can put it that way. And this is something that is not new. I can recall when I was the immigration critic, and we saw a picture of a boat that came on the shores of BC, where you had the Minister of Immigration talking about boat people landing in Canada, and we are going to get tough with that and bring in legislation to prevent that from happening, Mr. Speaker. It's that whole let's get tough talk, Mr. Speaker, which does not necessarily match the reality or the complexity of many of the different issues that come before the House. Mr. Speaker, it's interesting that the government has been so keen on bringing forward Bill S7, as it's really been pushing on this legislation. The Minister of Immigration has made this a personal priority in terms of making sure that this legislation passes, Mr. Speaker, and has spent a great deal of resources on it. Well, an earlier speaker made reference to immigration and another form of cruelty that is there. And I would suggest to you, Mr. Speaker, that there is other priorities that the government, and particularly the Minister of Immigration, needs to get his head around and start acting on. And one of those, Mr. Speaker, is, in fact, processing times for marriages. It has gotten worse. The government creates a problem, huge, unacceptable delays, and just wants to blame them on a previous administration from years ago, Mr. Speaker. This minister needs to take responsibility for his actions and start cleaning up the mess that they've created. I only wish that he would put just as much energy in wanting to clean up his mess in processing times as he is in pushing Bill S7. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? Questions and commentaires? L'honorable député de Pierrefonds-Dollard.
The Honourable Member for Pierrefonds-Dollard. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for his remarks. He mentioned a number of issues. He raised some of the aspects contained in the bill, but it's not clear to me yet if he's going to be voting in favor of it or not. So perhaps he could clarify that in his answer, and perhaps he could comment on the fact that at committee, many experts who work in the field have raised their concerns about this bill and say that it might, in fact, have an adverse effect on victims. It might victimize them even more. We do need to be able to step in and help victims. There's an issue there, and he referred to that, and I agree with his remarks in that area. We do need to do something for those victims, but is S7 the real approach when we've had so many experts at committee who've talked about making victims even more vulnerable? Wouldn't it be a better idea to withdraw the bill and to conduct more in-depth studies and to ensure that what's put in place doesn't run counter to the bill?
Mr. Speaker, at the beginning of my remarks, I made reference to the fact that the Liberal Party will, in fact, be supporting and voting in favor of S7, even though there are some concerns, in particular, with the title of the bill. And we understand and appreciate a number of concerns that were expressed at committee stage. Having said that, if she would have also been listening to her colleague, who started the debate off this morning on this bill, who acknowledged that there are many aspects of this legislation even the NDP support. And I think that I'm not too sure exactly how the NDP are going to be voting on the legislation. I'm told that they're going to be voting against it, but I'll let them make that determination when the vote actually occurs.
Questions and comments? Questions and commentaires? L'honorable député de Pierrefonds-Dollard.
The Honourable Member for Pierrefonds-Dollard. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, I'm not sure who's not listening to who or hearing whom, but we have expressed our position. We did so at second reading. We expressed that, and the member can go back to the Hansard and to look at our position. So many experts have said that this bill, beyond the title, contains measures that will, in fact, set up a situation where victims won't want to denounce a forced marriage. They won't want to denounce polygamy because they're afraid of being deported. When so many experts working in the field who are familiar with the situation, who know the Criminal Code and the Immigration Act, say that this bill is dangerous, well, it's impossible for the NDP to vote in favor of it and to go proceed with it if we take work at committee seriously. Now, it's clear that we must oppose it and put forth better measures. But this is it's classic Liberal approach to say that they disagree but to vote in favor of something anyways.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I would have to agree to disagree with the member. If anything is classical, it's the NDP in terms of just their attitude and saying, well, yes, there's many things that are good inside the bill, but because we are opposition, that then means that we have to vote against the bill. And what we find, Mr. Speaker, is that we should recognize that there are at times legislation that can, in fact, improve upon a law and on balance, if it is good legislation, that it is something that can be supported. As we have seen, Mr. Speaker, even at times, New Democrats will often support government legislation. At the end of the day, as I say, there are concerns that we had with the legislation, but overall, dealing with the issues of polygamous marriages, dealing with the issue of forced marriages, early marriages, the issue of domestic violence, there is clarifications in acts that will assist in dealing with these issues in a more progressive way, and therefore it is legislation that is ultimately worth voting for, Mr. Speaker. It's unfortunate that the government has labeled the bill as barbaric culture, but that is not something that is incorporated into the legislation in itself, even though it would have been a good amendment.
Resuming debate, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise today to speak on Bill S7, the Zero Tolerance for Barbaric Culture Practices Act. I want to comment on two confusions that have arisen in the context of the debate of this bill and were also reflected in some of the testimony before committee. I want to briefly touch on two topics today, the first concerning the proposed minimum age for marriage, and the second about the definition of practicing polygamy. Mr. Speaker, during the debate and the testimony before the Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration, there was considerable discussion about whether the bill should have the set minimum age for marriage even higher than 16 years of age, as is proposed, with some suggesting that the age of 18 would be more appropriate. In Canada, the age at which individuals can marry without additional consent is either 18 or 19, depending on the province or territory. Under our Constitution, it is within provincial and territorial jurisdiction to make the determination of an independent marriage age. Under our Constitution, it is the jurisdiction of the Parliament of Canada to determine the age below which no minor may legally marry, sometimes called the absolute minimum age for marriage. Right now, in Canadian law, federal legislation specifies that age 16 is the absolute minimum age for marriage
only for the purposes of the law of the province of Quebec. Elsewhere in Canada, because there is no federal legislation, the common law still applies, and it is usually interpreted as an absolute minimum age for girls of 12 and of 14 for boys. Mr. Speaker, the other issue I want to touch on is the concern that the bill has no definition of practicing polygamy. One witness before the committee referred to the decision of the British Columbia Supreme Court in the polygamy reference case and suggested that it did not determine the meaning. That is incorrect. There was disagreement before the court on the correct interpretation of the criminal code polygamy offense, but Justice Bowman clearly indicated that polygamy is a form of marriage involving more than two people and includes legal marriages as well as purported forms of marriage, meaning religious marriages are not categorized in law, but where the parties believe they are bound together. He further accepted the Attorney General of Canada's argument that marriage is a form of union that is dependent on an event, a ceremony of some kind, that sanctions a union of individuals. It is absolutely clear that polygamy does not include common law relationships or other informal relationships such as polyamory or affairs. All of the evidence presented demonstrates harms, both to individuals and to society, of multi-party marriages. These harms of polygamy cause Justice Bowman to find the prohibition against polygamy constitutional. Clear guidance with respect to the meaning of practicing polygamy will be provided to frontline immigration officials. Another witness suggested that only the man practicing polygamy because of his union with more than one spouse, but that women in a polygamous union should not be included because their union is only to one spouse. This suggestion, while I'm sure well-meaning, completely defies logic. The final point I want to make, Mr. Speaker, concerns another confusion. Some have suggested that a person who is married to someone and either doesn't know that that person is already married to someone else or who is forced into that marriage would be considered to be practicing polygamy. This is completely untrue. Under the criminal code, a person who has no actual knowledge that they are in a polygamous union or a person who is forced into such union has not behaved in a morally blameworthy manner, which is the cornerstone of criminal law. If a person is unaware of relevant facts or has been compelled to act, they are not guilty of a criminal offense. Mr. Speaker, Bill S7 would protect young people from early marriages by enacting a new national absolute minimum age for marriage that would apply to all marriages performed in Canada and to all marriages performed outside of Canada that involve young people ordinarily resident here. This is an important protection for all our young people. I have been told of instances where young people are excused from classes to be married by telephone at age 12 and 13. That would no longer be possible once this bill receives royal assent. This bill would also give young people the ability to tell their parents that they cannot be forced to marry someone they do not want to marry because it's against the law. It would give young people the ability to ask the court order to take their passports away from their parents if they are afraid they may be taken out of the country to marry. These are important changes to the law to protect vulnerable youth until they are old enough to better know their own minds. Marriage is hard enough, and young married couples will face challenges without adding to them the burden of marrying too young and marrying someone they don't wish to marry. Our government is taking a strong stance against these practices and is leading international efforts to address them as a violation of basic human rights. I hope all members of this House will join with me in supporting this important bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for his remarks. This particular bill is one of the bills that I have taken to heart. It's one of the bills that resonates with almost every single woman across this country. In fact, I actually wrote to every single woman in my constituency, and I received back unanimous support. Every single person that wrote back to me was in favor of this bill for the very reasons that it protects women and girls. Now, the reality is that this could also happen to a young man or a gender, a boy. However, the reality is it is women and young girls. And I'd like to ask my honourable colleague how important it is to stand up and protect vulnerable women and young children in this country.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for her comments and, of course, for her hard work on this bill, which, of course, is aimed at protecting the most vulnerable, of course, women and young women
and also males, of course, because it's of universal application. I have 3 daughters, Mr. Speaker, and I can hardly envision a situation where, you know, the mother or the father, the parents would force them into a relationship that they would not be willing to undertake of their own free volition. As my comments were earlier, I mean, it's hard enough leading a married life with someone that you truly love, but to be forced into a situation where you have no control because of the wishes of your parents, I mean, it's beyond any element of human dignity. So this is an important bill, and I would ask all members to get on board and support it. It's for protecting the most vulnerable.
Questions and comments? Honourable Member for Northwest Territory.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my colleague for his definitions that he provided to us today in his speech. But I want to go to this basic idea that we're passing this law that's going to do something. In Denmark, the Parliament of Denmark unanimously passed a law making a criminal offense to force anyone to marry. 6 years after the law was enacted, not one single charge has been brought up under that law. And the people that deal with these types of issues in Denmark say that they don't think that this law has had any impact. In fact, it might have the negative impact of driving the process of forced marriages underground and changing increasing the sophistication of those that make these decisions for their children, and that is what has happened with this law. And so can we not, we've gone into this time allocation procedure on a law that affects many, many people in this country. The marriage laws are extremely important to people. And now we've made a decision about this. Is this going to help? We don't know whether this is going to help. So why does the member think that somehow by criminalizing this act that somehow that's going to change the cultures of the people that are involved in it?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can't speak to the willingness of the Denmark officials, law enforcement officials, to enforce their laws in a country over which we have absolutely no jurisdiction. But, you know, we're now in an age today with the Internet, and the young people are on the Internet, they're on Facebook. I mean, there was a time when your child would come to you and say, "Dad, can you fix my car?" Well, now I go to my daughters and say, "Can you fix my computer?" So look, the abundance of information that's out there, despite the cultural bounds of whatever family you come from, this information will be readily available to children. I mean, we're in a Canadian society. They will be encouraged to come forth, and I'm confident that they will come forth and the authorities will act accordingly.
Resuming debate, 5 minutes remaining for the Honourable Member for Northwest Territory.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my colleagues who stood by me all these many years. I'd like to open up by saying that we have put forward a number of amendments to this bill. The bill with the title that seems so almost silly that we put a title forward for a bill in Canada of this nature. But we have proposed amendments that work to try to enhance or fix this bill. But really, we don't anticipate that these amendments will be passed, and we'll be likely to oppose the bill at report stage. So, you know, the intent of the bill, the intent of dealing with this particular issue is fine. But as I pointed out in a previous question, simply by criminalizing an action that is an action within a family, between individuals, an action that is normally considered to be very much a decision that is made by those people, not by the state, not by the community. It's made by the individuals that are engaged in matrimonial practices. So what we have is a bill that is going to say very clearly that you can't force a marriage, and you can't force someone into marriage. That act is in my experience, in many years, I've been married myself this is my 40th year of happy marriage, and I'm very proud of having accomplished that. Luckily enough, I didn't force anyone into a marriage, but someone just by their beauty and charm and good nature just made it unbelievably compelling for me to go into marriage. And luckily enough, she said yes. And thank you for that, the opposition. And so we're concerned that we deal with this in a very careful fashion. We're concerned that the criminalization of these acts is probably not the appropriate method to deal with the situation that we have at hand. It's not going to make the difference that's needed to be made. You know, Mr. Speaker, we talk about marriage laws. Well, in the Northwest Territories at this time, under the NWT Marriage Act, the marriage age is 15 years. So that's what has been determined by the NWT government and put into place under Section 46 of their act. So we obviously under this act we're going to change this. We're going to have to change this now to 16. Any marriages that have taken place or contemplated in the next while that people are under the age of 16, of course, they'll have to wait now. That's fair enough. I would wonder what consultation the government went into with the provinces and the territories about what they considered to be a fair age and how they feel that the provinces and territories should have their authority to set the age as they deem fit taken away from them and now established by the this Parliament. So those are questions that I think I would like some answers for, and I think that we would all look at that. Now, when it comes to violence against women, against children, in society, we all in this House want to do things to prevent that, to change society so it's less violent, so that people can live their lives in a good fashion, free from duress, free from being under the force of others, whether it's in marriage, whether it's in the relationship after marriage. Those are things that we're all in favor of. I'll continue my speech after questions.
Yes, I regret having to interrupt the member from Northwest Territory. He will have 5 minutes remaining when this matter returns before the House. Déclaration de députés, statements by members. The honourable member for Thunder Bay Superior North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Congratulations to Paul Morley, Paul Capon, and Canadian Lighthouses of Lake Superior for their successful bid to protect heritage lighthouses in Thunder Bay Superior North. Their work will create much-needed economic development opportunities for rural communities and augment our new Lake Superior Marine Conservation Area. On May 29th, the Minister announced that 74 lighthouses will be designated under that Act, but she didn't specify which ones. Many groups are still in the dark about whether their lighthouses have been given heritage protection. Without that status, it's difficult for them to move forward with any needed repairs or apply for any new funding opportunities for lighthouse maintenance. Once again, this government's secrecy is affecting Canadians and Thunder Bay Superior North's regional economic development opportunities. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
This government.
The honourable member for Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou.
Mr. Speaker, every year on June 12th, World Day Against Child Labour is observed to raise awareness of the plight of millions of children who are involved in child labour and are vulnerable to abuse and exploitation. This year, the focus is on the importance of quality education as a key step in tackling child labour. Our government is committed to ensuring that the best interests of children are given priority, including access to education. Children should be learning and developing their skills in school, not working in factories. That is why we recently tabled the International Labour Organizations Convention 138 on minimum age in this House. One of the Convention's key objectives is to ensure that children and young workers do not leave school to join the workforce full-time. This important step towards ratifying a core convention demonstrates our commitment to ensuring all children can pursue an education and enjoy their childhood.
Here, here.
The honourable member for Nickel Belt.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in tribute to all the volunteers who do so much to keep our communities vibrant. I particularly want to acknowledge the hard work of the individuals for the West End of Nickel Belt. Those are the people responsible for events like the fantastic Canada Day celebrations held at the Northern Ontario Railroad Museum in Capreol, Blueberry Pancake Breakfast in Skeet, Capreol Days in August, the Spudsbury Potato Festival in Blizzard Valley, Cavalcade of Colors in Onaping Falls, the 40th Annual Valley East Days. These events give visitors to Nickel Belt an opportunity to see how northern hospitality is second to none.
I would like to particularly highlight Gary Mishlak and other great volunteers who organized the Café Héritage in September, as well as the 400th Champlain Festival, which celebrates Franco-Ontarian history, which will be taking place this Saturday.
Including all of the volunteers that keep our communities thriving.
The honourable member for Newmarket Aurora.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians and this government are always prepared to stand up and speak out about systematic discrimination. Today I stand to speak about one of the most despicable and disturbing forms of discrimination that has ever been presented in this House. Mr. Speaker, witch doctors in Eastern Africa, in and around Tanzania, have been systematically murdering local Africans who suffer from albinism, which is a lack of skin pigment, to sell their body parts, believing that those human body parts bring good luck. More than 80 people with albinism have been murdered in Tanzania since 2000, including a 1-year-old boy just a few weeks ago. Mr. Speaker, according to the International Red Cross, witch doctors are prepared to pay up to $75,000 for an individual with albinism, alive or dead. Canadians are tolerant people, but, Mr. Speaker, this practice must stop.
The honourable member for Ottawa-Vanier. Mr. Speaker, I join my colleague from Newmarket Aurora on the same subject. Albinism is a rare hereditary genetic condition found around the world. In North America and Europe, about 1 person out of 20,000 has albinism. In Eastern Africa, it's 1 person out of 2,000. The Canada-Africa Parliamentary Association, which I co-chair, recently adopted a resolution urging parliamentarians to undertake an initiative to defend the rights of persons with albinism. The resolution was drawn up following a recent mission of the association to Eastern Africa, where individuals with albinism suffer discrimination that can result in attacks, kidnapping, dismemberment, infanticide, murder, and gang rape. Our association invites all parliamentarians to use their influence in their communities to fight against prejudice and misinformation, to educate their fellow citizens about the fundamental rights of persons with albinism, and to advocate for respect of the rule of law and particular vigilance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for West Vancouver, Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky Country.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to mark the tragic death of 3 persons, including 2 cyclists in my riding last week. On June 7th, Ross Chafe and Kelly Brundon were cycling north of Whistler when they were struck and killed by a driver who was reportedly impaired. They were both fathers and key figures in the community. Also killed was the passenger in the car, Paul Maurice Pierre, Jr., a member of the Lillooet Nation. The driver had 3 previous convictions for impaired driving. He was prohibited from being behind the wheel. Our grief can compel us to action. We need good safety protocols for cycling and to incarcerate impaired drivers. My hope is that initiatives like the Attorney General's new proposed law, the Cycling Town Hall I convened in Ottawa on May 25th, and the Forum on Cycling Safety that I've organized for June 20th in Squamish will create positive change. For the sake of Ross and Kelly and those who love them, and for all who bike, may we bring about enhanced rules and policies for both drivers and cyclists. Fellow members of this House, please rise with me in a united spirit of condolence for those who grieve the loss of Ross, Kelly, and Paul.
The honourable member for St. John's East.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to mark the 75th anniversary of the deployment of some of Newfoundland and Labrador's finest and bravest to World War II. 2,500 men and 500 women served in the Canadian Armed Forces, others served in the Royal Navy, and we fielded 2 Royal Artillery regiments in the British Army. The 57th Newfoundland Heavy Regiment, later becoming the 166th Field Regiment, Newfoundland Field Regiment, fought in North Africa and Italy, and the 59th Newfoundland Heavy Regiment fought alongside Allied forces in France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Germany. The exceptional valour and incredible skill of the Newfoundland artillerymen was widely recognised and celebrated. Sir Anthony Eden, then Secretary of State for Dominion Affairs, said upon their arrival in England, "Newfoundland, whose sons have fought side by side with Englishmen since the days of the Tudors, responded at once to the call that echoed round the world. You may be sure that the spirit of Newfoundland is not forgotten."
The Honourable Member for Ottawa-Orleans. Mr. Speaker, this year we are celebrating 400 years of French presence in Ontario. In this House, 7 years ago, I talked about this anniversary.
In the company of Ontario's Minister responsible for Francophone Affairs, Madeleine Meilleur, I had the pleasure last night of unveiling a new silver coin engraved with the image of explorer Samuel de Champlain. Champlain visited the Great Lakes area in 1615. This gave him the opportunity to build lasting relationships with our First Nations.
He also created conditions that favored economic growth for a vibrant Francophone community in Ontario, one that is still thriving today. This newest silver coin issued by the Mint sheds a new light on the explorations of Samuel de Champlain in Huronia. It also serves as a reminder that 4 centuries later, Champlain's heritage lives on and is reflected in the richness of the French culture in Ontario. Thank you.
Member for Calgary East.
Mr. Speaker, we have recently witnessed horrific tragedies of people fleeing from their homes because of prosecution and economic and deteriorating security in their homelands. We have witnessed these desperate people using any means to seek safe refuge. To make matters worse, human smugglers exploit these situations with no regard to human life. The recent deaths of both migrants from Africa and the plight of Rohingyas from Myanmar are just a few examples of people being exploited. Mr. Speaker, it is important the International Committee raise its voice through letting governments like in Myanmar be told in no uncertain terms that their treatment of Rohingyas is unacceptable, as well as targeting human smugglers who must be punished as murderers of innocent people. Canada is doing its share by offering refugee status to those vulnerable people through the UN. Mr. Speaker, we must act before more lives are lost. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Drummond. Mr. Speaker, as you know, in my riding of Drummond, local stakeholders contribute greatly to the social, economic, and cultural vitality of our beautiful region. On the economic front, we recognize Commerce Drummond, the Drummond Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and the Drummond Economic Development Agency, who all greatly contribute to our dynamic economy. On the cultural front, we have the Regroupement Interculturel de Drummond and the Mondial des Cultures, a summer event that is not to be missed. I've had the opportunity to meet with these organizations, and I've learned that, unfortunately, the changes imposed by the Conservative government on visa rules for foreign interns are threatening the socioeconomic development of our region. Organizations and employers in Drummond are suffering from this bad decision. I have no doubt that after October 19th, an NDP government will be listening to the needs of Drummondville.
The member for Oak Ridges Markham.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as another school year comes to a close, I wanted to take an opportunity just to thank the wonderful men and women, the staff and teachers of Harry Bowes Public School in my hometown of Stouffville. I've had the very fortunate opportunity to work closely with teachers, great teachers such as Karen Smiley, Fern Granon, Gail Sedgwick, Amy Davis, Vivian Searles, Caitlin Eby, wonderful teachers who have spent a lot of time with my kids and all the kids in our great school, who have provided a happy, safe, healthy learning environment, Mr. Speaker. They've been ably led by Principal Dixon, who unfortunately will be leaving us for another school, Mr. Speaker. This is an incredible place where they take the time to learn and to give our kids all of the support that they need. I also want to highlight the work of Laurie Davenport and Deb Battler, who know that when Dad's in town, the kids might be a little bit late getting to school and have always been very patient. So on behalf of my family and all families in our community, thank you so much for all of the great work you do. You're very much appreciated. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby, New Westminster.
As Pride celebrations take place across Canada, I rise today in support of New West Pride, which aims to promote equality and diversity. New West Pride Week will be August 8th to 15th in New Westminster. August 7th, 2010 was our first Pride Day in the city, organized by Vance McFadden. And the Royal City Pride Society's primary mission is to promote inclusiveness, tolerance, and understanding, and support LGBTQ citizens of New Westminster. New West Pride is recognized throughout BC and across Canada as a celebration of all sexual orientations and gender identities. It happens with active and wonderful participation of local businesses and civil society. It's a highlight of the year. I wish to congratulate the Royal City Pride Society for bringing different cultures and creeds together to express our common values of peace, love, and respect for human rights and human dignity. I hope to see thousands out again celebrating at the Columbia Street Party on Saturday, August 15th. Let's celebrate Pride, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Moncton Riverview Dieppe.
Mr. Speaker, the hard-working middle-class workers of Moncton Riverview Dieppe reject the Liberal leader's plan to impose a $1,000 tax hike. By promising to enforce the Ontario Liberals' dramatic hike in payroll tax across Canada, the Liberal leader would impose a tax hike on every single Canadian family. It would force employers to cut jobs, hours, and wages. Mr. Speaker, our Conservative government has this year alone cut taxes by $6,600 for every typical family. We have expanded the tax-free savings accounts so Canadians can save more tax-free money. And the Liberal leader, of course, would take this away and would raise taxes. Now, Mr. Speaker, it's not the time for risky Liberal tax schemes and an untested leader.
The honourable member for Westmount, Ville-Marie.
Mr. Speaker, I came to Ottawa in 2008 hoping to promote science in Canada. I believe that to innovate, we must prioritize science. In 7 years, however, I have seen how little respect the government has for science. Our funding of scientific research has dropped below the OECD average to just 1.6% of GDP. This government eliminated the long-form census questionnaire, damaging what was previously the most important social database in the country. This government has muzzled our federal scientists, particularly environmental scientists who dare to speak the truth about global warming. This government has ceased funding the experimental lakes area, a priceless outdoor laboratory. It has diverted funding away from fundamental science, and it has nothing but contempt for the social sciences. Mr. Speaker, our health, safety, and prosperity critically depend on how we choose to prioritize science and how readily we are willing to share it. On this, I'm sad to say this government has totally failed Canadians.
Excellent. The honourable member for Saskatoon-Rosetown, Bigger.
We have learned that the Liberals don't believe that helping every single family is fair. We also heard that the NDP think that only families that use licensed daycares are real families. This is actually what they believe. They believe that only a few select families deserve support in Canada. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we believe that 100% of Canadians with families should get help. This is why we introduced the universal child care benefit and the family tax cut. We will not dictate to Canadians on how to spend their own money. While we are keeping more money in their pockets, the opposition parties' only plans are to raise taxes on families.
The honourable member for Rimouski-Neigette-Témiscouata-les-Basques. Mr. Speaker, Canadians have a clear choice. On the one hand, the Conservatives, a tired party that would rather defend corrupt senators pilfering the public purse to pay for their golf games and holidays instead of truly defending the middle class. On the other hand, the NDP, with a clear economic plan to create jobs in our regions, including a tax cut for small businesses. And we also have clear solutions to help families make ends meet, like an affordable, universal daycare system. To sum up, between a party that's for the status quo and protecting their Senate buddies, or a party that will clean things up, it's a clear choice. In October, Canadian families can have a government they can trust. A government that will defend them through good times and bad. An NDP government.
The honourable member for St. Catharines.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberal record on free trade speaks for itself. They are the party that campaigned to rip up the North American Free Trade Agreement. When they were in government, the Liberals completely neglected trade. In fact, they only completed 3 free trade agreements. The Liberals took Canada virtually out of the game of trade putting Canadian workers and businesses at severe risk of falling behind in the era of global markets. Even to this day, they are opposing the biggest export contract win in Canadian history, a contract that will create and sustain thousands of jobs right here in Ontario, especially in London, and the advanced manufacturing industry across our country. Thankfully, our government is fixing the mistakes of the Liberals. We've concluded agreements with 38 countries, Mr. Speaker, and there are more to come. As Conservatives, we know the best job creator is liberalized markets through free and open trade through this world. Thank you.
Question orale, oral questions. The honourable member for Hamilton Centre.
Mr. Speaker, in February of 2013, the Prime Minister rose in this House and declared, quote, all senators conform to the residency requirements. Well, that's not what the Auditor General found in his devastating report on Senate corruption. He found that 5 of the 9 senators whose cases are now referred to the RCMP were not actually residents of the provinces they were appointed to represent. Mr. Speaker, did the Prime Minister at least ask any of these senators whether they were eligible to sit in the Senate before he appointed them?
The Honourable Parliament Secretary to the Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I said on a number of occasions, the rules with respect to appointing senators have been clear for almost 150 years, Mr. Speaker. But at the same time, it's worth highlighting the fact that when 2013, when we were starting to eliminate direct voter subsidies, taxpayer subsidies for political parties, the NDP were in the middle of a scam to still get voter subsidies, Mr. Speaker. Unfortunately, they did that by breaking the rules of this House. They cheated in order to help their political party. That's against the rules. It's not why taxpayers send us money. They owe $2.7 million, and they might as well just do the right thing and pay it back.
The honourable member for Hamilton Centre.
More nonsense from that member. Clearly, the Prime Minister never even tried to confirm his appointees were actually eligible. No wonder they think they can get away with anything. And the secrecy continues. When asked about their new appeals process, the Senate replied, quote, we do not disclose information about legal contracts. The entire process will be shrouded in secrecy. This is accountability, Conservative style. Does the government really agree that a secretive internal board is the right place to dispute the evidence-based findings of our Auditor General?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, as you know, it was the Senate that invited the Auditor General in to review their expenses, and it's the Senate that should respond to that report. And we expect that the senators will abide by their recommendations, Mr. Speaker. But at the same time, we know that it is very public that the NDP owe the Canadian taxpayers $2.7 million for illegal offices, Mr. Speaker. That's 3 times as much as has been identified by the Auditor General with respect to their expenses, Mr. Speaker. But unlike some of the senators, the NDP are refusing to pay back the $2.7 million that they owe. The member for Hochelaga owes $24,250.
Order. The honourable member for Halifax.
The Prime Minister must tell us what he thinks of this Senate scandal, but instead, senators continue to defend the indefensible. Senators will be deciding for themselves what they think of the damning conclusions of the Auditor General. They'll be deciding whether they think that personal spending on fishing expeditions were in order. Does the Prime Minister agree with this opaque process?
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's absolutely not correct, and the member knows that that's not correct. The Senate has invited in former Justice Ian Binney, Mr. Speaker, and we support that process. Again, it was the Senate that invited in the Auditor General to review their expenses in the first place. But at the same time, Mr. Speaker, Canadians don't differentiate. When parliamentarians owe them money, they want it back. That's why it's important that the 68 members of the NDP caucus who have been identified for owing $2.7 million back to the Canadian people ought to pay it back, Mr. Speaker. It's very clear. Pay back the money that you owe.
The honourable member for Halifax.
Mr. Speaker, Loblaws announced that they will stop the production of products containing microbeads that are so harmful for our health and environment. This excellent decision is a reminder of how urgently government action is required to eliminate microbeads. The NDP tabled a motion that was unanimously adopted by the House of Commons. Since then, however, the Conservative government has done nothing. When will the government finally act?
The The Honourable Prime Secretary for Health.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, Environment Canada has initiated a scientific review to assess the effects of microbeads on the environment. This review is on top of what we have already done to reduce toxic substances in the environment. We have taken measures to eliminate over 2,000 toxic substances in the environment, and we are on the right path to assess over 4,000 more substances by 2020. We will also be putting microbeads on the agenda for the meeting of the environmental ministers this summer.
Mr. Speaker, it's really not that complicated. The House unanimously passed a motion calling for Canada to move to eliminate microbeads. 40,000 Canadians have signed petitions to get rid of them, and now Loblaws is taking microbeads out of all of their personal care products. There's a lot of momentum to get this done. This Conservative has failed to take any action at all. So when will the government do what Canadians want and what other countries have already done? When will they take the first steps towards banning microbeads?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for the Environment.
Mr. Speaker, I don't agree with that, the premise to that question. We have taken immediate action. Environment Canada has initiated a scientific review to assess the effects of microbeads on the environment. We have to rely on the science. This review builds on the work that we have done to reduce the risk of harmful chemicals. Since 2006, like I said in French, we have taken action on more than 2,700 substances under the Chemicals Management Plan, and we are on track to assess 4,300 substances by 2020. We're also going to include these issues of microbeads on the agenda of this summer's meeting of the Canadian Council of Ministers of the Environment. Mr. Speaker, we're taking action. We're not just talking.
The Honourable Member for Westmount, Bill Marie.
Mr. Speaker, under the Liberal Fair Plan, all families earning less than $150,000 per year will receive a bigger monthly check. A couple trying to raise 2 children on $45,000 a year will receive $9,850 per year under our plan, compared to $5,900 per year under the Conservatives. We can do this because we will not put in place policies that mainly benefit wealthier Canadians. Why do the Conservatives insist on not supporting those who need help the most? Mr. Speaker, the Liberal leader would like to abolish a universal child care benefit. He wants to eliminate tax credits for children. He has admitted that he wants to eliminate income splitting for families. Mr. Speaker, even after all that, he is still admitting on top of that that there is a $2 billion hole in his plan, and therefore he'll have to increase taxes even further, Mr. Speaker. A few weeks ago, he admitted on top of that that he wanted a new $1,000 tax on every worker.
L'honorable député de Westmount, Bill Marie.
Mr. Speaker, average Canadians need a break, all of them, including single people and single-parent families. Our fairness plan will substantially reduce income taxes for middle-class Canadians, including singles. Our child benefit plan is more generous, simplified, and tax-free. Unlike the Conservatives' income splitting, it is not aimed only at a small percentage of families that are so rich they can get by on one paycheck. It reaches a much larger number of families, including single-parent families. That's what fairness looks like. Why is the government failing to do as much?
Right on. The Honourable Minister of Social Development.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberal leader admits he will get rid of the universal child care benefit. He admits he will get rid of the child tax benefit. He admits that he will cancel income splitting and replace the family tax cut with his family tax hike. But he also admits that even after all those tax hikes and clawbacks, he is still at least $2 billion short. Economists say the number is much bigger. And we know when Liberals have a financial shortfall, what they do. They raise taxes on the middle class. And, Mr. Speaker, we're doing exactly the opposite. We're cutting taxes and increasing benefits for 100% of Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Westmount, Bill Marie.
Mr. Speaker, the National Post writes that the Liberals' revamped child benefit appears broader, simpler, and better targeted than the Tory plan without imposing punitive clawback rates. And, Mr. Speaker, we're reducing middle-class income tax by a full 7% on top of that. Unlike the NDP's promises, our plan is fiscally responsible. Unlike the Conservatives, it's fairer and it benefits a much larger number of Canadians. Why doesn't the government take a leaf from our book?
The Honourable Minister of Social Development.
Mr. Speaker, the only thing the Liberals propose is a new tax. They confirmed that they support Kathleen Wynne's payroll tax, which would be $1,000 in extra taxes for every single worker earning $60,000 a year. This is a new tax on every single worker that will hit especially hard for middle and lower income people, and it will be matched by the small businesses that employ those people. Mr. Speaker, we oppose the Liberal job-killing payroll tax. We're lowering taxes for workers and families.
The Honourable Member for Northwest Territories.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday on the 7th anniversary of the apology to residential school survivors, the Prime Minister had the perfect opportunity to demonstrate the government's commitment to reconciliation by asking the Pope if he would be willing to issue an apology. Indigenous people are deeply disappointed that the Prime Minister refused to do so, with National Chief Perry Bellegarde saying it was, quote, sad and unfortunate that it did not happen. Why did the Prime Minister choose to ignore this critical opportunity to show good faith on the path to reconciliation?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Aboriginal Affairs.
Well, Mr. Speaker, of course the Prime Minister did no such thing. The Minister of Aboriginal Affairs has written to provinces, territories, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and the Vatican to bring to their attention the work of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. The Prime Minister referenced that letter in his meeting with Pope Francis yesterday. Our government remains committed to a fair and lasting resolution to the legacy of Indian residential schools. As acknowledged by the Prime Minister's historic apology here in 2008, there's no place in Canada for the attitudes that inspired the Indian residential schools to ever prevail again, and we'll continue to take concrete action on behalf of
The Honourable Member from Manicouagan. Mr. Speaker, as the saying goes, where there's a will, there's a way. But in this case, the federal government clearly lacks political will. And in the end, it's the provinces that are the ones who are showing the way, like Quebec, that recognize that Indian residential schools were a tool used for cultural genocide of Aboriginal peoples. Therefore, they are calling on the federal government to act. Will the federal government follow their example and show some leadership?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it was this Prime Minister that issued the historic apology in 2008 on behalf of all Canadians. He said that this was an assimilation policy that had no place in Canada and that we could never let the attitudes that inspired that policy to take root in Canada again. It was our Prime Minister that set up the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which reported just last week. We will continue to take concrete action and concrete measures to promote reconciliation between non-Aboriginal and Aboriginal Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Yesterday, the Supreme Court, the highest court in the country, handed down a unanimous ruling on the consumption of medical marijuana. The ruling was barely out when the minister stated, and I quote, "Frankly, I'm outraged by the Supreme Court." Once again, the Conservatives are trying to discredit the decisions of our highest court. Unfortunately, this seems to be a habit of the Conservatives who believe they're above the law. Will the minister stop bashing our justice system?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, this expansion of a pre-existing court-imposed program to now include cookies and candies makes marijuana more attractive and accessible to youth, and really is reflective of the Liberal campaign to normalize marijuana use. I think it's really important that most medications in Canada go through a very stringent process in terms of being safe for use. And another important point is recent figures showed St. Paul's Hospital saw 63 patients for marijuana intoxication in one day, and most of them had taken edibles.
The Honourable Member for Toronto Danforth.
Mr. Speaker, this isn't just some suggestion the minister can just take or leave. We're talking about a unanimous judgment from Canada's highest court. The Supreme Court carefully weighed the evidence and found the Conservative government's medical marijuana policies are not in the best interest of public health. Now, I understand Conservatives don't really believe in evidence-based policy and that they love to throw blue meat to their anti-judiciary base. But will the minister now stop attacking the court and do her job to implement the decision?
Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, medical treatments need to meet strict Health Canada requirements so that patients can be sure that they are safe and that they are effective. And it's important, serious researchers interested in investigating potential benefits, such as derivatives, such as oils, it should go through a clinical process. So again, the continued normalization through cookies, through candies, is, in our opinion, something that is going to be very detrimental to the health and safety of Canadians.
The honourable member for St. John's East.
Mr. Speaker, the Senate is a bastion of entitlement, yet Conservatives have thrown up their hands and given up. The change is not only possible, it's absolutely necessary. Senators have invented a secret process for disputing the Auditor General's findings, and days after the Senate Speaker promised a new age of openness, he's gone to court to block the release of a potentially embarrassing internal report on residency. Did anyone in the Prime Minister's office speak to anyone in the Senate about this latest attempt to cover up an embarrassing Senate report?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I've already answered that. As you know, it was the Senate that invited in the Auditor General to review their expenses, and we expect senators to assist in the process, Mr. Speaker. At the same time, this member could help us out by turning around, looking at his colleagues, and asking the 68 of them who owe the taxpayers $2.7 million to repay that money to the taxpayer, Mr. Speaker. It is absolutely unacceptable that the NDP owe the Canadian taxpayers $2.7 million for illegal partisan offices and are refusing to pay it back. They ought to do the right thing and pay back the taxpayer.
Honourable member for St. John's East.
Mr. Speaker, after promising to bring change to the Senate, the Parliamentary Secretary now clearly thinks it's not a priority. That's not acceptable to Canadians. When asked about the use of public funds to attend his brother-in-law's funeral, one senator replied that he brought, quote, the dignity of the office. The Auditor General is calling for transformational change, yet the Senate refuses even to confirm how much they are paying arbitrator Ian Binney. Why have the Conservatives abandoned their principles and have refused to demand accountability from the Senate?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, just the opposite. Just the opposite. The Senate invited in the Auditor General to review their expenses, Mr. Speaker. A report has been tabled, and we expect the Senate to work with the Auditor General to implement the recommendations of that report, Mr. Speaker. But what is also on the table is a fact of finding that 68 members of that caucus owe $2.7 million to the people of Canada, and they refuse to pay it back. The member for Louis Hébert owes $31,000, $31,888, refuses to pay it back. The member for Gatineau owes $24,498, refuses to pay it back. The member for Hochelaga, $24,000.
The Honourable Member for Alfred Pellan. Mr. Speaker, we still do not know if the Prime Minister checked into the residence of senators before appointing them. The extravagant spending on the part of senators is shameful, Mr. Speaker. And with total impunity, they paid for fishing expeditions, personal trips for themselves and their spouses, golf games, hockey tickets, all this at the expense of taxpayers. It is high time that we abolish this old institution. The majority of Quebecers no longer want it. Will the Conservatives finally stop defending the status quo?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, just the opposite. Just the opposite. But at the same time as the Auditor General was reviewing the expenses of senators, there was a report that was issued with respect to members of Parliament. And what that report found was that 68 members of Parliament owe $2.7 million back to the taxpayer. Now, all of those 68 members happen to be sitting in the NDP caucus, Mr. Speaker. So at a time when we were bringing in accountability to the House of Commons, they were finding a way to cheat and rip off the Canadian taxpayer, and are now refusing to pay it back. Pay back the $2.7 million you owe Canadians. It's the right thing to do, and you ought to do it.
The Honourable Member for Alfred Pellan. The Prime Minister continues to defend the indefensible. Rather than apologize for their unacceptable behaviour, senators appointed by the Prime Minister and Liberals continue on. They want to be the judges of themselves behind closed doors. Mr. Speaker, the nerve. Why is the Prime Minister defending these secretive backroom games? And why not do what the NDP is proposing and eliminate all these secret committees at the House and in the Senate so that the public can finally have some transparency once and for all?
Honourable Parliament Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I will not defend anybody who deliberately misuses taxpayer dollars. I certainly won't get up in this chamber and defend that, Mr. Speaker. That's why I think like Canadians think. I don't differentiate whether it's a senator or a member of Parliament. If you've deliberately misused taxpayers' dollars, you ought to pay it back. Now, the NDP owe 3 times as much as the Auditor General has identified in the Senate. They owe $2.7 million. The Leader of the Opposition owes $400,000 to the taxpayer of Canada, and he refuses to pay it back. He ought to do the right thing and pay it back.
The honourable member for Burnaby New Westminster.
As the scandals in the Senate have exploded, the Conservatives have taken to hiding the Prime Minister. And instead of answering questions, they bring on the very sad theatrics of the member from Oak Ridges Markham. Now, you remember he tearfully apologized to this House for his antics. He promised to change his ways, and then he broke his promise. And every time he speaks, he loses more support for Conservatives. This morning, Conservatives hit historical lows. Keep up the good work. Mr. Speaker, we Democrats believe we can and must bring change to the Senate. Why do Conservatives lack the political will to scrap the Senate, and why won't they listen to Canadians?
The honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians have turned their back on that party for 16 straight elections, Mr. Speaker. They have never, ever been given the confidence of Canadians to sit on this side of the House, Mr. Speaker. I'm very proud of the fact that Canadians have given us the confidence to sit on this side of the House, and I will continue to work every day to do that. Now, this is a member who admits that he actually owes money, $189,000. He's refusing to pay it back. He might think that's funny. Canadians don't. They want the money back, Mr. Speaker. Pay the $189,000.
L'honorable député de Saint-Laurent.
The honourable member for Saint-Laurent-Cartierville. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Heritage's preparations for the 150th anniversary of Confederation is a mess. For over a year, we have been asking for a plan for these celebrations, but instead, Conservatives have come up with a ludicrous infrastructure program, have only allowed a few weeks to submit projects, which is excluding many, including municipalities in Quebec. All this in a rush, topsy-turvy, haphazard, and disorganized way. Will they admit that this is simply an opportunity for their ministers to hand out manna before the elections?
The honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, our Conservative government is very proud to have established the Canada 150 infrastructure program, Mr. Speaker, and we are seeing significant interest from community groups, from not-for-profit organizations, from Legion Halls, Mr. Speaker, from across the country. We look forward to working with them, to partnering with those important organizations in our communities to not only renew recreational infrastructure, but to celebrate this country's 150th anniversary.
The honourable member for York West.
Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister clearly isn't known for bridge building. In fact, after pilfering 90% of the Building Canada Fund, Canada's 150 slush fund will now dole out ad hoc goodies without a plan for Canada's long-term infrastructure needs. Municipal leaders know that federal cooperation with our cities is at an all-time low. Canada's mayors are begging for money for sewer lines, subway lines, and all this Prime Minister does is offer them political lines. Well, cities know the difference between civil engineering and campaign engineering, but when is the Prime Minister going to know that?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Public Works.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that question is a bridge to nowhere. We will take no lessons from the Liberals with respect to infrastructure, Mr. Speaker. Since our Conservative government formed office, Canada has consistently led G7 countries with respect to investments in infrastructure as a percentage of GDP. Over the next decade, our Conservative government will invest $80 billion in infrastructure, Mr. Speaker. This includes the $53 billion new Building Canada plant. What will the Liberals do? They will hike taxes, and we learned this week they will raid pension plans in this country, Mr. Speaker. Canadians want the Liberals to keep their hands off the pension plans.
The honourable member for Trinity Spadina.
Well,
If you want to build a country, there's a party on this side prepared to do it. But if all you're going to do is talking points, that's talking points. Across Canada, cities and towns are scrambling, holding emergency meetings, trying to fill out very complicated and convoluted application forms to the Canada 150 Fund. There's different criteria for different cities. There are different provinces dealing with different application forms. This government has spent more time on composing their talking notes than they have and creating billboards than they have actually created an infrastructure program that works for towns and cities. Why doesn't this government sit down with the FCM, sit down with municipalities, come up with real money for transit and housing and infrastructure instead of these gimmicky plans and these silly programs?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, we are not only making record investments in infrastructure across this country, we are also making record investments in public transit. And these investments in public transit will go even further. Public transit is an eligible category under every component of the New Building Canada plan. And of course, in our recent budget, we announced the Public Transit Fund. This will provide support to major projects in large cities across this country. This Conservative government is getting it done, Mr. Speaker. Canadians understand these achievements.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby Douglas.
Mr. Speaker, in 2012, the former Minister of Citizenship proclaimed with great fanfare that the government was going to revoke the citizenship of thousands of fraudsters. 3 years later, the government has acted on only 81 cases, and the department has quietly admitted that many of the people it was pursuing were innocent. So this is a consistent pattern from the Conservatives, and especially that minister, exaggerating threats to score political points. Why don't the Conservatives for once put partisanship aside and focus on finally eliminating huge immigration backlogs?
The Honourable Minister of Immigration.
Mr. Speaker, a strange question coming from that party, which opposed our measures to improve the integrity, to strengthen the value of Canadian citizenship. We have taken action to revoke citizenship for misrepresentation, for fraud, based on due process, based on investigations under the law, and we will continue to do so. What is scandalous, Mr. Speaker, is that that party continues to oppose the idea that dual nationals should have their citizenship revoked, and that provision is now in force thanks to this government when they're convicted for terrorism, Mr. Speaker. That's what Canadians want, and the NDP has always refused it.
The Honourable Member for Pierrefonds-Dollard. All talk, no action. In 2012, the Minister of Immigration was so proud to announce that the government was going to revoke citizenship for 3,000 people who had supposedly obtained it fraudulently, but 3 years later we see it's only 81 people. Once again, the Conservatives chose to play petty politics at the expense of newcomers by accusing them of being fraudsters. In addition, these applications are dragging on, and there hasn't been action on some for over 3 years. So will the minister apologize to Canadians who were unfairly accused of being fraudsters and finally pick up the pace to process applications that are on hold? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, there are thousands of investigations underway, 100 or so serious cases where revocation may take place, and there are dozens of cases where citizenship needs to be revoked because of fraud, but it's not thanks to support from the NDP that we've been able to achieve this. The NDP has obstinately opposed all steps to enhance the integrity of Canadian citizenship, including for revocation of citizenship for people with dual nationality convicted of terrorism offences, and that is scandalous, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Pierrefonds-Dollard. On the inhumane case for blogger Raid Badawi, everyone is taking action except this government. Today, the Quebec government announced that it will immediately issue a certificate of selection for on humanitarian grounds. In Ottawa, radio silence from the minister. It's almost a stroke of midnight for Mr. Badawi, Mr. Speaker. This mistreatment could resume today. Will the minister follow suit? Do what the Quebec minister has done. Take action so that he can be reunited with his family.
Secretary for Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Foreign Affairs has spoken with the Minister St. Pierre from Quebec. The minister discussed their mutual concerns regarding the sentence given to Mr. Badawi. The minister looks forward to meeting with Minister St. Pierre in the very near future. Again, Canada considers the sentencing to be a violation of human dignity. We will continue raising this matter with the Saudi officials as we have in the past. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Hamilton East, Stony Creek.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this is an urgent situation. Mr. Badrawi's health is at risk, and his punishment is certainly inhumane. Mr. Speaker, advocating for human rights and democracy is certainly not a crime. Now the government of Quebec has said that province would welcome Mr. Badrawi and is prepared to deliver a certificate of humanitarian selection to Mr. Badrawi. So, Mr. Speaker, the obvious question, why isn't the Minister of Immigration taking action to reunite Mr. Badrawi with his family?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, as I have said, the Minister discussed this mutual concern regarding the sentence given to Mr. Badawi with the Minister St. Pierre from Quebec, Mr. Speaker. We are deeply concerned that Saudi human rights activists of Badawi have been sentenced. Mr. Speaker, Canadian officials have raised this matter with the Saudi government. Canada considers the punishment of Mr. Badawi to be a violation of human dignity, and we continue to call for clemency in this case. This will continue going forward until clemency is granted, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The honourable member for Sault Ste. Marie.
Mr. Speaker, our government is focused on what matters to Canadians, jobs and economic growth. Our plan for jobs is tax cuts, trade and training. 1.2 million net new jobs have been created since the recession, and almost 59,000 jobs in May alone. Can the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance update this House on what the government is doing to make life more affordable for Canadians?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Finance.
I would like to thank the member from Sault Ste. Marie for that excellent question. Mr. Speaker, today I am pleased to note that Canadian household net worth increased in the first quarter to an all-time high, reflecting continued gains in household assets. This is proof our low-tax plan is working. Our government has delivered on its promise to Canadians to make life more affordable and continue to lower taxes. This past year alone, we have doubled the tax-free savings account, introduced the family tax cut, and enhanced the universal child care benefit. As a result, the average family of four has $6,600 more in their pocket this year. With a fragile global economy, now is not the time for risky schemes and untested.
L'honorable député.
The honourable member for Laval. Mr. Speaker, Laval has had enough of Canada Post intransigence. Alongside Montreal, Longueuil and Westmount, it has decided to go to court to stop Canada Post's initiative to eliminate home mail delivery. And the movement continues to pick up speed across the country. More than 600 municipalities are opposed to ending home mail delivery. Will the Conservatives finally stop this and think about all of the people in Laval and stop this project?
Secretary for Transport.
Mr. Speaker, in 2014, Canada Post delivered many fewer letters than in the past. Two-thirds of Canadians do not receive mail at home already, and we are, in fact, looking at the NDP plan, and it will, in fact, cost $1 billion to Canadians, and that means that the NDP wants all Canadians to pay for this. That is not what we believe on this side of the House. We will we want to keep taxes low for Canadians.
Cities, Mr. Speaker, are where most of us live. They are the engines of the Canadian economy, and yet they've been saddled with an infrastructure deficit of nearly $170 billion by Liberal and Conservative governments. The Finance Minister has called further investment in urban infrastructure a risky spending scheme, ignoring most obviously the billions lost to our economy due to gridlock. You Democrats, Mr. Speaker, are ready to partner with our municipal leaders. It is in our national interest to do so. Why are Conservatives refusing to invest any more in our cities?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, it is this Conservative government that is making record investments in infrastructure, $80 billion over the next decade. This includes the $53 billion new Building Canada plan. And not only are we making record investments, Mr. Speaker, our government is keeping taxes low, and we're balancing the budget. What would the NDP do? They would take an Ottawa knows best, top-down approach. They would hike taxes, run permanent deficits, all of the above.
Hear, hear. The honourable member for Rivière-des-Mille-Îles.
Once again, vulnerable people are bearing the brunt of conservative decisions. We've learned that 300 Meals on Wheels programs will no longer have access to the New Horizons program. In Quebec, that's 30,000 people who average age 72 who risk seeing their services reduced. Will the service, is the Conservative government seriously going to be cutting funding for Meals on Wheels? Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, we created that program to help seniors across the country. I'm happy to tell the House that the program is working and is funding very specific programs that help seniors. We have the Minister for Seniors who travels across the country in order to provide the funding and improve the lives of seniors. In addition, we're reducing taxes, cutting taxes for seniors, and that's the opposite of what the NDP would do. The honourable member for Rivière-des-Mines. Well, funding for Wheels on Wheels isn't the only thing that runs a risk of disappearing. There's some $232,000 in the Laurentian region for homelessness that might end up in the Consolidated Revenue Fund. These organizations have serious needs, however, Mr. Speaker, and there are a number of programs affected. Will the government use the money to help fight homelessness in this area? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, as I just said, the program in question is well funded through our budgets and by the minister responsible for seniors. Mr. Speaker, I would point out that she does excellent work and she supported the measures we have put in place, including splitting lower taxes for our seniors. But the NDP just wants to hike taxes for our seniors, people who built our country, Mr. Speaker, and we will do the opposite.
For Markham Unionville. Mr. Speaker, yesterday in Maclean's magazine, Paul Wells wrote that the immigration minister's, quote, delusional and culpably misleading capsule history of Canadian immigration policy, quote, end of quote, and concluded that, quote, he's one of the least impressive ministers on an increasingly weak government bench, end of quote. So, Mr. Speaker, this minister's goose may be cooked, but will he at least do the right thing and offer a sincere apology to Canadian Muslims?
The Honourable Minister of Immigration.
Mr. Speaker, as some of you know, I spent 6 years in Afghanistan. I saw firsthand the systematic oppression of women by extremists like the Taliban, who often forbade women to uncover their faces on pain of death, Mr. Speaker. I take offense to what the member said in this House yesterday. I take offense to what the Liberal Party said 2 days ago, and I await their apology.
The Honourable Member for Markham Unionville.
Mr. Speaker, despite what the minister just said, he was asked about niqabs and immediately answered about terrorists. And there is incontrovertible video evidence of this that cannot be denied. So my question is, why does the minister keep playing to his party's old immigration reform party base by attacking refugees and Muslims? Why does he do it? Why will he not do the right thing, reflecting that background which he just described, and apologize to Canadian Muslims?
The Honourable Minister of Immigration.
Speaker, we all know that the member opposite has trouble taking responsibility for his own words, for the history of his own party, which has been anti-immigration, which has been against all the reforms that have been undertaken since 2006. But, Mr. Speaker, the words he has ascribed to me were never spoken by me. And, Mr. Speaker, on behalf of all the women of Afghanistan, on behalf of all the victims of Taliban oppression, on behalf of all those who've been forced by pain of death not to uncover their faces, I would ask that member to apologize.
The Honourable Member for Marc-Aurèle Fortin. Mr. Speaker, Small and medium-sized businesses are at the heart of the economy and create the vast majority of jobs in Canada. Unfortunately, our small and medium-sized businesses continue to pay some of the highest credit card fees in the world, with, on average, 2%. Many countries have limited these fees to a much lower level, with 0.5 and 0.3%. My motion to reduce exorbitant fees will be debated today. Will the government support my motion and SMEs?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Finance.
Mr. Speaker, we heard the concerns of small business and introduced a code of conduct. The code has been welcomed by consumers and industry groups, especially small business. We continually monitor compliance, and we are working with small business and consumers to ensure that both are heard. But the NDP voted against the code and against supporting small business and consumers.
The Honourable Député de Pontiac.
The Honourable Member for Pontiac. Well, today we have a better understanding as to why no inspections have been done at the Cliff Street Central Heating Plant. It's because the number of inspectors has decreased because of Conservative cuts from 120 to 80 inspectors. Trying to save a few pennies by jeopardizing the lives of public servants is unacceptable, Mr. Speaker. Will the minister step in quickly to ensure that all public servants work in safe environments, Mr. Speaker?
Secretary for Health.
Mr. Speaker, certainly our government is committed to workplaces that are safe, fair, and productive. And to state that the members of these inspectors is cut is categorically false. As of March 31st, 2015, there were 160 Labour Affairs officers who enforced the workplace health and safety standards that are set out in the Canada Labour Code. And we're proud of the hard work our dedicated Labour officers do each day to keep Canadians safe on the job.
The Honourable Member for Prince George Peace River.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, Israel has come under attack. In recent days, a number of rockets have been launched from the Gaza Strip. These rockets are indiscriminate in terms of where they land and are primarily intended to instill fear within Israel's civilian population. To be perfectly clear, Mr. Speaker, these are terrorist attacks. Can the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs please provide this House with Canada's reaction to these acts of terror?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank this Honourable Member for his hard work in the Parliament, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Canada condemns in the strongest possible terms these rocket attacks from Gaza. Right. According to the reports, one such rocket actually fell short of the target and landed within Gaza. This is just another proof of what we have said all along. The only group responsible for the suffering of the Palestinian people is the terrorist group Hamas. Israel is Canada's greatest ally in the region. While others like the NDP take every opportunity they can to single out Israel, our Conservative government stands with Israel. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Mount Royal.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, the treatment for Raif Badawi, a blogger, is unacceptable under the Agreement on Torture. His sentence has been maintained. This cruel sentence has been maintained. The only recourse is a legal royal abnegation. It's up to the Prime Minister to raise the issue directly with the country. Will the Prime Minister go to the King and ask to mark Ramadan with a compassionate and fair act, the release of Raif Badawi and the reunification with his family in Quebec?
Mr. Speaker, as I have said before, Canada is deeply concerned with the sentencing given to Raif Badawi, Mr. Speaker, of 1,000 lashes. Right. Canadian officials have raised this matter with the Saudi government, Mr. Speaker. Canada considers the punishment of Mr. Badawi to be a violation of human dignity, and we continue to call on for his clemency in this case. This will continue, Mr. Stronger, as long as he is being sentenced. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for West Vancouver, Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky Country.
Mr. Speaker, the principles of habeas corpus, no taxation without representation, the rule of law, and other fundamental pillars of a free and democratic society trace their roots to the Magna Carta. In my own life and appreciation for these things drove me to become a constitutional lawyer and to found the Canadian Constitution Foundation. On behalf of all Canadians who love freedom, can the Minister for Democratic Reform please update the House about the 800th anniversary of the Magna Carta?
The Honourable Minister.
Yes, I thank that member for accurately pointing to the historical importance of this 8th-century-old document, the anniversary of which we celebrate next week. In fact, Canada will play host to one of the copies, one of the issuances of the Magna Carta here at the Canadian History Museum. I was pleased to help unveil the new exhibit and encourage all Canadians to go there. I think I'm so enamored with it because it was born out of a tax revolt, and it was one of the first examples of where the power of the Crown, also now known as the state, was restrained and the power of the individual was elevated. We need to build on those principles, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Thunder Bay Superior North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When in opposition, our Prime Minister made many promises. He promised to never appoint a single unelected senator. He's appointed 59. We see how well that's working out. He also promised to implement proportional representation. Now, with only 39% of the popular vote but 100% of the power, he rather likes our archaic and undemocratic electoral system. Mr. Speaker, why does the Prime Minister not keep his word?
The Honourable Minister for Democratic Reform.
He is keeping his word, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has been very clear that he does not support proportional representation, just as Canadians who have been surveyed on the matter in numerous referenda across the country have likewise been clear in their rejection of that approach to democracy. We believe in the parliamentary system in which members of Parliament are responsible to their constituents and must go back to their geographical constituency for reaffirmation in every single election cycle. That is responsible government, and that is what we support.
Okay, the Hunsick.
Member for Hunsick. Mr. Speaker, on May 15th, the Prime Minister announced an infrastructure program for the 150th anniversary of Canada by inviting all municipalities to participate. But Quebec municipalities, including Ahuntsic-Cartierville, would currently be excluded from the program, even though the Quebec Minister of Municipal Affairs, has submitted a memorandum of understanding. What is the Minister of Infrastructure, Communities and Intergovernmental Affairs waiting for to sign this memorandum of understanding?
Parliamentary Secretary for Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, as I explained earlier, our government is very proud to have established the Canada 150 Community Infrastructure Program. It will help to preserve and improve treasured cultural and community locations, not only through the province of Quebec, but across the country, Mr. Speaker. We look forward to working with not-for-profit organizations in the province of Quebec and across the country to renew important recreational infrastructure in our communities and to celebrate the 150th anniversary of Confederation.
This concludes question period for today. Is the Chief Government Whip wish to rise on a point of order?
Mr. Speaker, I wasn't sure if you'd gone to tabling of documents. You're not there yet. I do understand that there was a profanity over the microphone when the response or the question came from the minister, the member from Superior, Thunder Bay Superior, and some of my colleagues definitely heard it, and it came from the member from Trinity Spadina, and I would think it would be appropriate if the member from Trinity Spadina were to apologize for speaking in such a fashion which the microphone happened to pick up because he was sitting adjacent to the member that was asking the question. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Trinity Spadina.
If something slipped out of my mouth that offended the honourable member, I will not contest it. If they were offended, I will of course apologize. the colleague next to me had the question. I was just astounded that the Tea Party is not good enough. The Magna Carta is now a conservative document.
I believe this closes this matter. Tabling of documents. The Honourable Chief Government Whip.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 83-1, I wish to table a notice of Ways and Means motion to amend the Income Tax Act. Pursuant to Standing Order 83-2, I ask that an order of the day be designated for consideration of the motion.
Tabling of documents. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 32-2, I have the honor to table, in both official languages, examples of the 2012-2013 annual report of the Labrador Inuit Land Claims Agreement and examples of the annual report for 2012-2013 of the annual report on the state of Inuit culture and society.
Tabling of documents, introduction of government bills, statements by ministers, reports from interparliamentary delegations, presenting reports from committees, introduction of private members' bills, first reading of Senate public bills, motions, presenting petitions. The Honourable Member for Thunder Bay Superior North.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I have petitions from many Canadians who are concerned about the election fraud that occurred in 2011 federal election, and they feel that due to fraudulent practices, including in Thunder Bay Superior North, that election results have been affected and the democratic right of Canadians to vote has been suppressed. And so they're calling upon this House, the Government of Canada, and the Prime Minister to call an independent, fully empowered Royal Commission into election fraud alongside the Elections Canada investigation to determine whether the Election Canada Act and any other Canadian laws were violated during the 2011 federal election campaign and to protect the integrity of our electoral system. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Presenting petitions, the Honourable Member for Beaches East York.
Mr. Speaker, please present a petition in the House today with respect to affordable child care. The signatories to the petition, Mr. Speaker, want to draw the attention of this House to the fact that after nearly a decade of Conservative government, child care costs continue to soar. There are nearly 1 million kids with working parents out there without regulated child care spaces. That quality childcare and early learning offer children a head start in life while easing poverty. And they further note, Mr. Speaker, that the NDP has put forward a plan to ensure quality, affordable childcare for up to $15 a day, and they are calling on the Government of Canada to work with provinces and territories to implement the NDP plan for affordable childcare in Canada. Thank you.
Presenting petitions, the Honourable Member for Etobicoke North.
Autism spectrum disorder, ASDs, are pervasive disorders that are characterized by social and communication challenges, a pattern of repetitive behaviors and interests. They are lifelong, profoundly affect development and life experience, and exert immense emotional and financial pressures on families. The petitioners call on the government to work with the provinces, territories, and stakeholders to develop a pan-Canadian strategy for autism spectrum disorder. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Presenting petitions, the Honourable Member for Burnaby Douglas.
Mr. Speaker, today I rise to present a petition signed by hundreds and hundreds of residents from British Columbia. The petition was created by Gwendy and Alfie Williams, two very passionate advocates from my riding of Burnaby Douglas. The petitioners call on the federal government to ban the sale and use of electric shock collars on domestic cats and dogs. The Canadian Veterinary Medical Association states that, quote, training methods utilizing pain, fear, distress, or anxiety, including violent use of shock collars, are to be condemned. And I urge the government to consider this petition very carefully. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Petitions, the Honourable Member for Nickel Belt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I have two petitions to present today. The first one is from hundreds of people in my community of Capriol, and they call on the Government of Canada to instruct Canada Post to maintain, expand, and improve postal service and seize any proposal to reduce hours and diminish service to the residents and businesses of Capriol. The second petition is also from dozens of people in Nickel Belt, and they call on the government to support Northerners in our universal health care system and want to ensure that every citizen of Northern Ontario has access to the same high-quality services whether they live and regardless of financial circumstances. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Laurentides-Labelle. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have two petitions from citizens of my riding. The first calls on the Government of Canada to end devastating cuts to postal service, and the second calls on the government to guarantee stable, multi-year long-term funding for our public broadcaster to ensure that it respects its mandate in all regions of the country.
Petitions, questions on the order paper. The Parliament Secretary of the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, questions number Q 1213, 1225, 1227, 1233, 1234, 1235, and 1258 will be answered today. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, if questions number Q 1206, 1208 to 1212, 1214, 1216, 1217, 1220, 1223, 1239, 1241 to 1243, 1245, 1249, 1253, and Q 1256 could be made orders for returns. These returns would be tabled immediately.
Is it the pleasure of the House that the aforementioned questions be made orders for return and that they be tabled immediately? Agreed, and so ordered. The Honourable Parliament Secretary.
Thank you. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, I ask that the remaining questions be allowed to stand.
Agreed. Agreed, and so ordered. Orders of the day.
Government orders, government bills, Senate resuming report stage consideration of Bill S7, Zero Tolerance for Barbaric Cultural Practices Act.
When this matter was last before the House, the Honourable Member for Northwest Territory had 5 minutes remaining in his remarks. The Honourable Member for Northwest Territory.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm pleased to have an opportunity to speak again to this bill in the short order after question period. I did talk about the bill, some of the issues that were involved with the bill prior to question period. I want to speak now about what's going to be ahead of us on family matters. And I want to refer the House to the Globe and Mail article this morning, which talks about a Nanos poll. And Nanos indicates, when asked which federal party was more trusted to help Canadian families, 34% of the poll's respondents picked the NDP. This compared with 27% who chose the Liberals and 26% who chose the Conservatives. Mr. Speaker, this speaks directly to the problems with this bill. The Conservatives have proposed an approach on marriage, a part of the family cycle so valuable to everyone. They proposed changes to it without consultation with the province and territories, with putting forward an idea that really doesn't accomplish much. The laws of duress are already in place. Other countries that have done similar laws have shown no results from them. What the NDP would do for families, for women, to deal with violence was very clearly articulated by the member for Churchill when she put forward a motion M444. It was a motion to establish a coordinated national action plan to address violence against women. Part of that would be strategies that address the specific needs and vulnerabilities of different communities, including specific attention to Aboriginal women, women with disabilities, women from minority groups, and young women. So what we proposed in our action plan, national action plan, was actually to get to the bottom of the issues surrounding groups such as that. And certainly the ideas that the Conservatives are concerned about by criminalizing forced marriages would be dealt with within a framework which will look for actual solutions to the problems rather than trying just to simply criminalize those that are engaged in it in a very broad and capricious way that really doesn't allow for definition or for any kind of rational action on that part. Mr. Speaker, we also asked, and I think this is really important, and it follows on the heels of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's report, which asked and followed many groups in society asking for an inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women. Mr. Speaker, that is one of the biggest and most pressing problems that we have with violence against women, with families in this country. The need for that public inquiry is so important. Why is it so important? The Prime Minister said this isn't a social issue. Of course it's a social issue. Much as forced marriages are a social issue. Much as all of this is social issues that need to be dealt with in a respectable, responsible fashion. Getting to the bottom of the issues that surround society that create the conditions that lead to violence, that lead to forced marriages, that lead to all the things that all of us in this House here today would not want to have happen, would not want to happen in our families, would not want to happen in Aboriginal families, would not want to happen in minority group families. Yes, we are concerned about it, but this retail politics of putting forward a bill that really does nothing except provide a title to an issue is really the wrong approach. And that's why across this country, the polling results that we see today about who actually trusts, who the Canadian population trusts to deal with issues for families is so revealing. We talk about real ways to come to grips with society's ills. That's not through legislation. That's through careful, enunciated conditions that rise out of careful examination of the issues. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I listened very intently to the member's entire speech earlier before QP. He actually made a comment with respect to why have criminal charges when it's within a family. Mr. Speaker, child abuse and incest is simply within a family as well. And thank goodness we have laws against that to protect young people across this country. The member also scoffs at the title of this bill, saying it shouldn't be called barbaric cultural practices. When someone, a minor, for example, a child, a girl, 12 or 13, is forced into an early marriage with, say, a man 40 years old, overseas from another country, that young woman, that young girl, that child is going to be raped every single day for the rest of her life. How could the member not think that is barbaric, or does he just simply think that it's all in the family?
The Honourable Member for Northwest Territories.
Mr. Speaker, all of the actions that I thank my colleague for raising the question. I can't agree with what she pointed out that I supposedly said. I'll look at the records to make sure that that wasn't said. But I go, all of the things that she's talking about are laws that now exist in society. All of the things that she's saying are those that we do have legal recourse to deal with those issues within society. Those are not issues that stand outside of society today. And I think that's something that, why this bill is, we support the intent of the bill to deal with family. We just say it doesn't work. It's not competent in what it's going to do for society.
Question and commentaire, l'honorable député de Pierrefonds.
Honourable Member for Pierrefonds. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my colleague. There seem to be two typical attitudes. We have the Conservatives in front of us who say they want to fight crime, but they don't give themselves the means to really have an impact. And they do a study in committee, but they don't listen to experts' recommendations. These are experts who work with victims and are familiar, very familiar with our criminal code. Now, the other typical attitude here is the Liberal attitude. They talk and talk and talk and speak against the bill, but they say they're going to support the bill. Is my colleague surprised by this? I think it's quite unfortunate, but not necessarily surprising.
The honourable member for Northwest Territories.
Well, thank you to my colleague for her intervention. Sincerity in politics is a form of that is sometimes abused considerably. And I think when it comes to bills like this, if you're supporting a bill because you're concerned, as the Liberals were with C-51, that somehow they might be tainted in the views of some important constituencies out there, that they might be tainted by supporting the bill or not supporting the bill, then they decided to support it. In this case as well, I think that's what's going on. If the Liberals say they don't like what's in the bill, if they say that they think that the bill is inadequate, they don't see that it's going to provide the proper results, then by golly, they should stand up and vote against the bill, because we're not here to make bad legislation. We're not here to put laws on the books simply to have laws on the books. We're here to do things for society that work. And that's very, very important, and that's why the New Democratic Party is trusted by Canadian families, because they know that we want to do things that actually work for them.
Resuming debate, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I do appreciate the opportunity to speak to Bill S7, the Zero Tolerance for Barbaric Cultural Practices Act. The measures contained in Bill S7 are the culmination of the Government of Canada's commitment to improve protection and support for vulnerable individuals, primarily women and children. In the most recent speech from the throne, our Prime Minister acknowledged that millions of women and girls around the world continue to suffer from violence, including the disturbing practices of early and forced marriage. The speech from the throne underscored our government's commitment to ensuring that such barbaric cultural practices do not incur in this country. Mr. Speaker, they have no place here in Canada. And in his appearance before the Senate Human Rights Committee on this bill, the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration made it clear that any practice that involves violence directed at women is barbaric. I think if you asked most Canadians across this country, especially women, they would agree to that statement. The measures in this bill would help vulnerable women and children in a number of ways. First, it would strengthen Canadian marriage laws by establishing a new national minimum age for marriage of 16 years old and by codifying the existing legal requirements for free and enlightened consent for marriage and for ending an existing marriage prior to entering another. They would render permanent and temporary residents inadmissible if they practice polygamy in Canada. They would criminalize certain conduct related to underage and forced marriage ceremonies, including the act of removing a child from Canada for the purpose of such marriage ceremonies. It would also create a new and specific preventative court-ordered peace bond to help protect potential victims of underage or forced marriages where there are grounds to fear someone would commit an offence. And they would ensure that the defence of provocation wouldn't apply in many special homicides and so-called honour killings. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to take a few moments to focus specifically on those measures in Bill S7 that address early and forced marriages, practices that contradict Canadian values and cause great harm to their victims. There is currently no national minimum age for marrying in Canada. Provincial and territorial legislation set out certain ages for additional requirements, such as parental consent for those under the age of majority, or court approval for even younger children. But they lack the constitutional jurisdiction to set the absolute minimum age below which no child can marry. Again, it's lacking. Federal law currently sets the absolute minimum age at 16 years old, but only in Quebec. In other parts of Canada, the common law applies because there is no federal legislation. The common law minimum age causes uncertainty, and it is usually interpreted as a minimum of 12 years of age for girls and 14 years of age for boys. 12 for girls, 14 for boys. Amending the Civil Marriage Act in order to set a national minimum age of 16 years old for marriage would make it clear that underage marriage is unacceptable in Canada and will not be tolerated, even though in practice very few marriages in Canada now involve people under the age of 16. It's important that we actually clarify this law. Mr. Speaker, other significant amendments to the Civil Marriage Act proposed in Bill S7, including codifying the requirement that those getting married must give their free and enlightened consent to marry each other. The amendments would codify the requirement for the dissolution of any previous marriage as well. Continuing on from proposed amendments to the Civil Marriage Act, Bill S7 also contains measures that would amend the criminal code to help deter and prevent forced or underage marriage. These measures would criminalize knowingly officiating at an underage or forced marriage, actively participating in a wedding ceremony knowing that one party is marrying another against his or her will or is under the age of 16 years of age, removing a minor for Canada for a forced or underage marriage. And there's also a new peace bond which would give courts the power to impose conditions on an individual where there are reasonable grounds to fear that a forced marriage or a marriage under the age of 16 will otherwise occur. The way that peace bond could be used to prevent an underage or forced marriage include requiring the surrender of a passport and preventing a child from being taken outside of Canada. Mr. Speaker, this is important for young women, women across this country, and for our children, helping to prevent family members from taking them out of a country to be forcibly married without being placed in the difficult situation of requiring individual women or girls to press criminal charges against another family member. All of the provisions in Bill S7, including those that address underage and forced marriage, will help ensure that women and girls are protected from isolation and violence. Women seeking a better life in Canada should never be subjected to constant fear and threat of violence or death simply for seeking out better opportunities for themselves and living their lives the way they choose to. We know that immigrant and newcomer women and girls may face additional barriers in protecting themselves and seeking assistance compared to women who are born here in Canada. And we want to ensure that the protection and assistance they need is available when they need it. Everyone here in Canada deserves the same protection, Mr. Speaker. All violence directed against women and girls, including the practices for early and forced marriage, have a very negative impact on families and society in general. They also seriously affect all those who are directly involved, from influencing immigration outcomes to breaking down opportunities for integration and success and creating isolation and fear. Mr. Speaker, Bill S7 would strengthen our laws protecting women and girls from violent and barbaric cultural practices. I am sure that we would all agree that we must stand up for all victims of violence and abuse and take the necessary actions to prevent these practices from happening here in Canada. By enacting Bill S7, our government is sending a strong message to those in Canada and those who also wish to want to come to Canada that we will not tolerate activities here in this country that deprive individuals of their human rights. We are sending a signal that we respect the freedom of choice of all individuals, regardless of gender. That's exactly what we would be doing by ensuring that this bill is passed into law. I urge all my honourable colleagues who are in this House and who will be voting on this bill to stand up for the rights of vulnerable women and children, vulnerable women and girls, and join me in supporting the passage of this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Minister of Citizenship.
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for her hard work on this issue, both in this place and in this government and in her home riding of Scarborough Centre. Mr. Speaker, does the Parliamentary Secretary not agree that for the NDP to be opposing this bill, to be opposing a minimum age for marriage, to be opposing the criminalization of facilitation of forced marriage is absolutely unacceptable in this day and age, given the testimony we heard of women in committee who had their jaws broken, women in committee forced into marriage, forced into rape, patterns of rape that threatened to last a lifetime. And does she not agree that inaction on these issues, which matter for every Canadian community, for every Canadian woman and girl, is absolutely inexcusable, and that the NDP are completely out of line on this front?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Yes, I absolutely agree with everything the Minister just said, and the NDP are absolutely on the wrong side of this issue. I actually wrote to the majority of women in my own constituency of Scarborough Centre. I outlined the aspects of this bill and I asked for their feedback. Overwhelmingly, every single response came in, agreed on these issues, supported our government stance. Unfortunately, I didn't include in that letter the opposition and obstruction of this bill by both the NDP and the Liberals. It's actually very sad. Mr. Speaker, prior to being the Parliamentary Secretary to Public Safety, I actually sat on the Status of Women and the Immigration and Citizenship Committee, and this issue is very dear to my heart.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for International Development.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague for her comments here in the House today. Mr. Speaker, I was in Malawi 3 years ago with the Canada-Africa Parliamentary Association and sat in front of a group of women from Malawi who were begging our association to speak out in Malawi about the issue of early and forced marriage. I was in Dakar with the Prime Minister for the Summit for the Francophonie, and we were taken to a museum where our whole delegation was shown the pictures of girls who had been forced into early marriage. And I was at the Girls' Summit in England last summer with David Cameron, where the topic of early and forced marriage was the topic of the day. Mr. Speaker, our government has put this issue on the table. Our former foreign minister took this to the United Nations and said that Canada was going to lead on this. We are leading on child protection globally. We've put maternal, newborn and child health on the table, and we have a number of other donor countries that are helping us with this. Early and forced marriage is one of the issues that goes against the grain of protecting children, and I wonder if my colleague has any comments on why Canada should not take issue here at home when we are being so vocal on the world stage.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to thank my honourable colleague, the Parliamentary Secretary, for all of her work she does in this area as well. Mr. Speaker, Canada is absolutely a leader when it comes to standing up for human rights and the protection of women and girls and children for people all around the world. As I stated in my previous answer, I did sit on the Committee for the Status of Women and previously on Citizenship and Immigration. This is an issue that is extremely concerning to me. Standing up for the rights of women and the protection of our children is the absolute priority that every single Canadian across this country must take to heart and must stand united on. It's very unfortunate that the Liberals and the NDP have voted against this bill, are poised to vote against it again at the next reading, and are trying to obstruct it. I'm not sure why they're trying to, perhaps they're trying to win some votes in certain communities, but I think when they actually think about it, many of those same communities that they're trying to win votes from actually support this legislation for all the reasons that our government has brought it forward for.
Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Halifax.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All right. I'm standing in this House to speak out firmly against this bill, and my intention was to discuss it through two lenses. The first would be the lens of unintended consequences, because when we present legislation, we need to think about what are the consequences, and sometimes there are unintended consequences. There are a lot of them with this bill. And then the second lens I wanted to apply was what would we do if we actually wanted to stop forced marriages? What kind of legislation or policy could we bring forward if we were really serious about putting an end to underage marriages in Canada? But before I get to talking about this legislation through those two lenses, I want to start, and I will talk about those two things because the NDP is very serious about bringing forward legislation and policy that can put an end to underage marriage and put an end to forced marriages. But first, I want to tackle this issue of the title. And we heard a little bit of a back and forth between my colleague from Western Arctic and the Parliamentary Secretary about the title. And the title of this Act is Zero Tolerance Zero Tolerance for Barbaric Cultural Practices. And I have a big problem with this title, Mr. Speaker, because the parliamentary secretary stood here and she wrung her hands and she, implored us to think of the children and isn't this a barbaric cultural practice? And you know what? What we're talking about in this bill, yes, absolutely. We all agree these are terrible practices. But when you have this kind of a title, when you have this kind of a shock value provocative title, it's not about working together to actually eliminate this kind of behavior or eliminate these practices. What this title does is it fuels stereotypes, racist stereotypes. It invokes, it creates xenophobia towards very particular groups in Canada. Right? This is about we're targeting particular groups with this title. And I think about, what about the other barbaric cultural practices happening in this country? And why aren't the Conservatives standing up for other barbaric cultural practices? Because I happen to think that it's a barbaric cultural practice that a woman who is raped is forced to carry that baby to term because she cannot access abortion services in this country. I happen to think that that is a barbaric cultural practice, and yet I don't see the Conservatives standing up and fighting for that. I happen to think that it is a barbaric cultural practice to force a woman to bring a baby to term if she doesn't want to have that baby, but you don't see the Conservatives crusading to change the fact that only 16% of hospitals in Canada offer abortion services. They're not champions of the lack of access to abortion services in Canada. I think it's a barbaric cultural act that we have created a culture that puts such shame on women, that shames them to the point where they will do anything to terminate a pregnancy and not have to tell someone, like throwing themselves down the stairs, like taking drugs to start to self-abort, like using coat hangers. I happen to think that that's a barbaric cultural practice, and yet I hear silence in this House about putting an end to that. PEI, Prince Edward Island. A woman took a medication to induce an abortion and had a complication, and she went to the ER. She was bleeding. She didn't know. Was she bleeding to death? She had no idea. She waited for 5 hours in the ER. And then when someone actually came in to talk to her about what was going on, the attending healthcare provider, he said to her, "I'm not comfortable treating this. You should go to Halifax." Halifax is not down the street. Halifax is 300 kilometers away. I happen to think it's a barbaric cultural practice to leave that woman in that ER for 5 hours, not knowing about the health or the state of her fetus, not knowing about her own health, not knowing if she's going to bleed to death, and then saying, "Oh, I'm not comfortable treating you." I happen to think that that's a barbaric cultural practice, and yet I don't hear the Conservatives standing up to enforce the Canada Health Act to ensure that we have equal access to health services across this country. And come to think of it, I don't hear any of the Liberals standing up to talk about this either. It's a Liberal government in PEI. We have 3 Liberal MPs here in the House of Commons, and we have a whole lot of silence when it comes to standing up for women's rights and their ability to access abortion services. So, moving on. Let's get back to unintended consequences. If we are serious about putting an end to these practices, then let's look at how we do it. Let's draft some legislation, and let's think about what are the consequences, both intended and unintended. And unfortunately, there are a lot of unintended consequences here. You've heard several of my colleagues talk about these unintended consequences. I think they're really, really serious. I think they are so serious that we cannot support this bill. Something as simple as the definition of polygamy. There isn't a real definition of polygamy here, and you might think, well, we kind of all know what polygamy is, so what's the big deal? Well, it is a big deal. We're playing with people's lives here. We need a definition. So we heard testimony at committee actually saying, well, what happens if there is a legally sanctioned marriage and then one that is not legally sanctioned? So an example could be you're married, Mr. Speaker, you and your partner split up, and you get into a common law relationship. If that first relationship hasn't legally been terminated and you are in a new common law relationship, is that polygamy? We don't know. I mean, it's a small, what may be perceived as a small detail, but it has serious consequences for all kinds of people in Canada who might not know that they're in a polygamous relationship. That is a smaller detail that, you know, I can maybe even wrap my head around. But there are other unintended consequences that are beyond the pale. If we are trying to help women, if we are trying to help marginalized women, disadvantaged women, then we can't put them in these situations where they are so fearful that they can't come forward. We heard tons of expert testimony about this, Mr. Speaker. It's actually really shocking when you look at the transcripts from committee, the way that how passionate some of these witnesses were about the fact that this legislation will drive those women deeper underground if we want to help them, and children as well. If we want to help these women and these children, we can't have them be fearful that they will be deported. Can you imagine if this deportation that happens? It isn't just the big bad guy that we're always talking about, right? The one who's forcing this little girl into the marriage. I heard the minister talk about, you know, forced rape for the rest of her life. Well, if that little girl doesn't know that she can get protection from our government, why is she going to come forward? If there are laws that say that everybody involved in this polygamous marriage gets deported, that includes that little girl. How does it help that little girl to send her to another country where there are no protections, where there probably aren't even opportunities for her to go to school? How about we put an end to that kind of barbaric cultural practice? Can you imagine sending a little girl out of the country when all she wants is protection? That is an unintended consequence that I cannot get past. This legislation is full of these unintended consequences. So I'll skip to what do we do? If we're serious, how can we work together? We had some really good testimony at committee about how we need to have institutional support for these victims. We can have that kind of support without alienating and harming the women that are involved in forced marriage and in gender-based violence. We need to have those institutional supports for them. UNICEF talks a lot about the fact that if we're going to protect children from human trafficking, we have to recognize the failures of the system that are allowing those women and those children to be trafficked. We have to recognize that they're coming often from low-income families, without access to community supports, without access to I'm blanking on the name, immigrant support services, to settlement services, without access to people in the community that they can turn to and say, help me. I'm in this situation. I need help. So if we were serious, we could get together, we could sit down, we would scrap this bill, and we would start over. And we would come to the table and we would talk about what would help these women and children. What kind of supports can we give them? Because somehow, Mr. Speaker, I don't think deporting them is exactly what we had in mind when we thought we would want to put an end to polygamy, underage marriage, and forced marriage in this country. I don't think that's the right solution, Mr. Speaker, and I don't think if we took our partisan hats off for a minute that many of us would come to that conclusion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Minister of Citizenship.
Mr. Speaker, it must have been very painful for the member opposite to make that speech, because she clearly understands that women are facing violence in this country, are facing barbaric practices, and yet she just spent 10 minutes telling this House, telling all Canadians why there is no need to take action by legislation to protect women and girls. Mr. Speaker, this member said that settlement services are needed, that funding is needed, that programs are needed to protect women and girls who are victims of forced marriage, polygamy, sexual violence, honor-based violence. And yet, Mr. Speaker, she will not, and the NDP will not afford these same women and girls the protection of the law, of Canadian statute, of the criminal code. Why is it, Mr. Speaker, that this member does not accept there should be a minimum age for marriage in this country. And why is it, Mr. Speaker, that this member does not understand there is a definition for polygamy in this law and in this country, and it is marriage to multiple people, Mr. Speaker? Why does she not understand those basic facts? Why is she not willing to take action to protect women and girls today?
The honourable member for Halifax.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It wasn't painful for me to give that speech at all. It might have been painful for the minister to hear it because I was speaking the truth, and that probably hurt a little bit. So, you know what? The NDP is really clear. We do support a minimum age for marriage. Full stop. Period. Fine, final. But the thing that I know I can't ask him a question back, but if he gets another chance to stand, I ask him to answer the question, how does deporting a woman who is, or a girl who's in a forced marriage, how does that deportation protect her? It is beyond any kind of comprehension to think that that is what would help women. If we were going to help women, we would have an opportunity for them to exit that marriage, not for us to kick them out of the country. So I'd love for him to answer that.
Question et commentaire, l'honorable député d'Alfred Pelin.
The honourable member for Alfred Pelin. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague, the member for Halifax, for her remarks. In this bill, there's a lot of talk about helping women. Women are already marginalized, and this will marginalize them even more. With S7, that is really a step in the wrong direction. I'd like to hear the comments from the member with respect to the Conservatives' position on women generally. Now I have an example of Aboriginal women, the missing and murdered Indigenous women. The Conservatives are refusing to take action, refusing to act on the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So what does my colleague think about this doublespeak and hypocrisy from the Conservatives on marginalization of Canadian women?
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for her question. She has used a word that I don't remember exactly how you say it in French, doublespeak.
Putting an end to barbaric cultural practices. What about the fact that we as a country, if you are an Aboriginal woman, if you don't look like me, right, I'm going to be okay. If you are an Aboriginal woman, you are more likely to be murdered than someone like me. I don't think that's justice. I don't think that's the kind of Canada we intended to create, but we're there. So why aren't we taking action? How is it that there was a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, that the report said clearly that this is a cultural genocide that was attempted with residential schools? How is it that we don't see any action? 94, I think it was 94 recommendations. 64, did I get it? It was just tabled. That's very helpful. All of these recommendations, and we have heard not a peep. So if we want to talk hypocrisy, it's pretty easy. Just come into this House and listen to what the Conservatives have to say about some groups, but not others. And they're certainly leaving the First Nations communities out in the cold.
Resuming debate, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I am pleased to rise today in the House to speak to Bill S7, the Zero Tolerance for Barbaric Cultural Practices Act. Our government is committed to protecting young women and girls from early and forced marriage and other barbaric practices. During my speech, I would like to highlight the provisions of the bill that are designed to protect Canadian children from early and forced marriage. Mr. Speaker, although we lack national statistics on the incidence of early and forced marriage among children in Canada because these practices are kept hidden, there are indications that children in Canada are subjected to the barbaric practices of early and forced marriages. According to the South Asian Clinic of Ontario's study on forced marriages, in Ontario between 2010 and 2012, 10% of the 219 victims identified were between the ages of 12 and 15, and 25% were between the ages of 16 and 18. International studies have shown that girls are predominantly the victims of a child marriage, increasing their risk of violence. complications in childbirth, and creating a significant barrier to achieving gender equality as they are regularly forced to disrupt or abandon their education. Mr. Speaker, a number of witnesses testified during the committee's hearings about the very disturbing cases of girls in Canada who had been forced to marry or taken abroad to get married despite their young age or their lack of consent. In some instances, young girls are tricked into leaving the country for a wedding ceremony of a relative, only to discover that the wedding is their own. While there are currently some legislative tools available in Canada to prevent and respond to underage and forced marriages of children, there are some significant gaps in the law that Bill S7 aims to fill. Firstly, there is currently no national minimum age below which children are not legally capable to consenting to a marriage. In Canada, the free age of marriage, or the age at which a child becomes an adult and can give consent to marry on their own with no additional requirements, is 18 or 19 years of age, depending on the province or territory where the marriage takes place. All provincial and territorial marriage acts set out additional requirements for minors to marry, such as parental consent, a court order, or proof of pregnancy. Under the Constitution, setting the absolute minimum age for marriage is a matter of federal jurisdiction. However, apart from federal legislation that sets a minimum age of 16 years for marriages in Quebec, the minimum age elsewhere in Canada is set out in the common law or court decisions. This old common law sets the minimum age at 14 for boys and 12 for girls. There is no clear minimum age across the country setting the absolute minimum age. Mr. Speaker, Bill S7 will enact changes to the Civil Marriage Act that will effectively prevent all marriages under the age of 16 from occurring anywhere in Canada. This will close the current legislative gap and set a national minimum age for marriage across Canada, consistent with countries such as the United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand. Further, by making all children under age 16 legally incapable of consenting to marriage, Bill S7 also ensures that if a child is taken out of Canada and married in a country where such child marriages are legal, upon the child's return to Canada, the underage marriage will be voidable because the child lacked the legal capacity to marry. Bill S7 will amend the Criminal Code to provide criminal protections against underage and forced marriages. The new provisions are directed to the public sanctioning of an underage and forced marriage ceremony, which creates an unwanted and harmful legal bond within which sexual offences are expected to occur. The two new offences criminalize conduct related to knowingly officiating or knowingly and actively participating in a marriage ceremony where one or both of the spouses is either under the age of 16 or marrying against their will. While a person will not be prosecuted for just being a guest at the wedding, those who conduct the marriage ceremony and those, including family members, who actively engage in conduct directed at facilitating the underage or forced marriage ceremony with full knowledge that one party is underage or marrying against their will, may be criminally liable. In keeping with the objective of the criminal law to deter people from committing crimes, these new provisions send a clear and important message about the need for all Canadians to reject the misguided belief that any underage or forced marriage can be in a child's best interest. As well, the bill will make it an offence to remove a child from Canada for the purposes of a forced or underage marriage ceremony outside of Canada. It builds on an existing provision in the Criminal Code that makes it an offence to remove a child for the purposes of committing certain crimes, such as child sexual offences and female genital mutilation. Bill S7 will add the new offences related to officiating or actively participating in an underage or forced marriage ceremony to the list of offences in the existing provision. This will effectively punish those who attempt to or who do remove a child from Canada for the purposes of an underage or forced marriage ceremony abroad. It should also serve to prevent these removals from taking place at all because it allows officials to intervene before the child leaves the country. Without this amendment, the current law would require authorities to have evidence that a sexual offence was intended to be committed abroad following the marriage. With the amendment, evidence of an intended, forced, or early marriage would enable preventive measures to be taken. I want to take this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to respond to comments that I have heard many times about how child victims of forced marriages are reluctant to continue to contact the authorities prior to the marriage because they do not want their parents or other relatives prosecuted. The Criminal Code amendments in Bill S7 that I have just noted provide the foundation for a very important prevention measure. Bill S7 provides for specific forced or underage marriage peace bonds, which will provide courts with the power to impose conditions on an individual when there are reasonable grounds to fear that a forced or underage marriage will otherwise occur. For example, an order under the new peace bond provision could prevent a victim from being taken out of Canada or require the surrender of a passport. These peace bonds are available to victims who want protection but do not want their parents or other relatives prosecuted. People subjected to peace bonds are not charged with a criminal offense unless they breach the conditions of the order. It is important to point out that a third party, such as a social worker, police officer, or a relative, can intervene to request the peace bond on the child's behalf. It is important that everyone know and understand that this conduct is illegal because it is the most vulnerable in our society, our children who suffer serious harm when forced, usually by their family members, to marry underage or against their will. How can we not do everything possible to stop this? Mr. Speaker, our government is taking steps to strengthen the laws to help to ensure that no young girl or woman in Canada becomes a victim of early or forced marriage, polygamy, so-called honor-based violence, or any other form of harmful cultural practices. I am proud to support the Zero Tolerance for Barbaric Cultural Practices Act, and I urge all of my colleagues to do the same.
Question and commentaire, l'honorable député.
Questions and comments, the honourable member for... The honourable member. Well, I listened very carefully to the remarks made by the speaker opposite, and I agree with the intent behind the bill. We need to take action on some of these issues immediately. We need to deal with these cruel crimes that can't be pardoned. Mr. Speaker, I agree with that. Just say that that type of violence against women and children is completely unacceptable. Barbaric, if that's the word they have chosen to use, but we agree on that. But where we don't agree is with respect to the most effective way of fighting those types of crimes. Now, the issue needs to be debated because there have been a host of experts in immigration law and other areas who have raised legitimate concerns, Mr. Speaker. And it's disappointing to see that despite all of those comments by experts at committee, the government still didn't accept any amendments and has not changed or considered any aspects of being proposed. I'd like to know if the member opposite is aware of those warnings and concerns raised by experts.
Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague opposite for that question. Mr. Speaker, no government has done more to protect women and girls than this government with the number of pieces of legislation that we have put forward. I've read carefully the testimony that was presented at committee, and I would remind the member that the provisions in this bill will allow our government, will allow women and girls to be protected through this legislation. For example, currently, there is no clear minimum age across the country. Setting the absolute minimum age for marriage falls under federal jurisdiction. Mr. Speaker, the measures in this Act will go very far in terms of protecting all women and girls. Thank you.
Questions and comments, Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for International Development.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my colleague spoke at length about the national minimum age. And quite frankly, I was surprised to know that there wasn't a national minimum age But she also spoke about some international focus on this topic, and I wonder if she could talk about some of the other countries that have set a national minimum age, and how is Canada in light of those decisions other countries have made.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable colleague for her question. Australia, Austria, Finland, Germany, Italy, New Zealand, Norway, and the UK have 16 as the minimum age below which no one can marry, even with parental consent. This is consistent with the approach in the bill that we are debating here today. Several like-minded countries have set 18 as the age of marriage without additional consent from parents or the courts, but have no minimum age of marriage. For example, Belgium, France, Iceland, Ireland, the Netherlands, Spain, Sweden, and most of the United States. This is similar to the current law in Canada. Setting a national minimum age of 16 years for marriage is consistent with the current federal legislation that applies only with regard to the province of Quebec. It is also consistent with what happens now in Canada, where very few provinces have set that. Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the question, and it does fall under the jurisdiction of the federal government to set this minimum age. Thank you.
Reprise de débat, l'honorable député d'Alfred.
The honourable member for Alfred Penna. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it's always an honour for me to rise to speak in this House on behalf of the citizens of Alfred Penna in Laval, who I have had the honour of representing now for 4 years. So I'm happy to speak to Bill S7, an act to amend the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, the Civil Marriage Act, and the Criminal Code, and to make consequential amendments to other acts. Or, as the Conservatives love calling it, the Zero Tolerance for Barbaric Cultural Practices Act. I heard in the testimony that we've heard and in the speeches that have been made today many references to equal rights, equal opportunities for women, and I'd like to focus specifically on this issue. But before that, I would like to speak to a couple of points that have been proposed by the Conservative government and to the work that my colleagues on this side have done on this bill. First of all, I'd like to thank my colleague from Pierrefonds Dallard, who is our critic on immigration, who is doing incredible work and who did great work on the study of Bill S7. I saw her work at committee and the amendments that she proposed, so I would like to offer her all of my support for the amendments that she is attempting to make to improve Bill S7. So first of all, I would like to say that, well, I support the intention of this bill, which would fight polygamy, forced marriage, and early marriage. I also recognize that all violence against women and children is absolutely unacceptable, Mr. Speaker, and there's still a lot to be done to prevent these crimes. However, I remain convinced that this bill is not an adequate response to such a serious problem. Bill S7 could make some problems worse, Mr. Speaker. And it's also important to mention that no woman should be a victim of sexual violence that includes forced and early marriage. This bill could have some very serious unintended consequences on women and children. For example, by increasing social pressure on the victims of forced marriage and by deporting the victims of polygamy. These conservatives, if they really had the interest of victims at heart, they would have listened closely to warnings from various experts who appeared at committee and done greater study before adopting such measures as proposed here. Instead of putting forward a sensationalist bill, particularly given the title that they've given this, a bill that doesn't really fight the source of the problem, I sincerely believe that the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration should commit to serious consultation on a large scale with community groups and specialists to fix the real problems of sexist violence. And there are many things that the government could do, Mr. Speaker, to help women and to deal particularly with the marginalization of women. Mr. Speaker, generally speaking, women, even if there's already a historic number of women in this House, well, we're far from equality at 50-50, but I hope that we'll get closer and closer to that with more and more women running for Parliament. But there are many concrete measures that the government could take to help women across the country. Women who want to get involved in politics, be it at the municipal, provincial, or federal level. Women who want to change laws to meet their own needs. We know that when there are more women in power, we get very different laws, and we see very different approaches. Problems that are fixed by women are dealt with in a better way for women, and we see that's extremely beneficial to have that equality of 50% or more women in a parliament. We see that that leads to concrete changes in the bills that are debated and moved. Here, for example, we have a bill that is very sensationalistic, and I find that utterly deplorable, and I hope sincerely that my colleagues from across the way will take the time to study the amendments that were moved by my colleague from Pierrefonds, who is simply trying to instill some common sense in this bill. I still believe in this Parliament. I have hope for this Parliament, and I will continue to believe in Parliament, but I hope that we can work. You know, we work together to improve things. You know, we have committees here that hear from experts from across the spectrum, and those experts have raised a number of concerns with this bill, and I would say that on this side of the House, we've done some very serious work on the proposals made by those experts who appeared at committee. So we've taken some of their ideas to try to improve this bill. Because the concrete measures that are found in Bill S7 won't have the desired effect, unfortunately. So I sincerely hope, and I'm speaking from the heart of the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration today, asking him to look at these amendments, take out the sensationalist and partisan elements of this bill, and move forward with a bill that would have more common sense and that would lead to real consultations. Because, well, what I've seen from the expert witnesses who appeared at committee is that there's been a lack of consultation. And I would like to quote here Action Canada for Health and Sexual Rights, which has said on Bill S7 that this bill shows a lack of consultation, a lack of transparency, a lack of participation, and a lack of public debate. The changes proposed are not based on the experience of women and girls who have been the victims of violent acts, including forced marriage. And now that's pretty damning testimony concerning the lack of consultation. And I truly believe that when we have a bill like this, which is intended to help women and girls across the country get out of, among other things, forced marriage and violence against women, well, I think that it would be important to have some concrete solution to help those women. I believe that every member in this place, Mr. Speaker, is very familiar with the incredible work done by organizations in their ridings. There are many organizations in Laval that are working for women, whether it be in the political sphere, encouraging them to get involved in elections or to participate actively in elections. There are also organizations that help women in need. For example, there's the table of collaboration. There's another organization that my colleague from Laval-les-Îles is also very familiar with that seeks to help women in many areas that fight marginalization and ensure that women have the same rights as men across the country. So there are many things that need to be done, and I see that my time is quickly running out. I'd like to talk a little bit about what we could do to help women across the country. And this might go beyond what could be done in Bill S7. There are many things that could be done to help women in various communities. I mentioned when I asked a question to my colleague from Halifax, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, in its recent report with 94 recommendations, well, I would say that about a third of those recommendations are recommendations where the federal government can play a key role, and particularly on the file of missing and murdered Indigenous women across Canada. That's something that the government should have been looking at for a long time now, and I think that if the government truly wanted to help those women, missing and murdered Indigenous women and their families, they could have done something concrete on that. There are many other areas that could have been touched upon to fight the marginalization of women. For example, there's pay equity, or the place of women in boards of directors, whether it be for public or private organizations. There are some concrete steps that could be taken, but when it comes to Bill 7, I would mention again that I sincerely believe that we can improve this bill. It's not too late. Amendments have been proposed by the NDP, and I still sincerely hope that the Conservatives will put some water in their wine, add those amendments to the bill, and stop playing partisan games with Bill S7. So thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I eagerly await the questions from my colleagues. The Honourable Member for Laurentides-Labelle. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One way to determine the value of a bill is to ask what it might change in some very concrete situations, real situations, instead of getting into hypotheses. For example, in the case of the Shafia family, what would this bill have changed for the Shafia family, the women in that family, if this bill had been there? They might have been deported to Afghanistan. I'd like to hear my colleagues' thoughts on that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Alfred-Pellant. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague from Laurentides-Labelle for the questions he's raised and his interest in Bill S7. And there are a number of things, as I mentioned, that could be done differently with Bill S7. And once again, I would say that the ball is in the Conservatives' court in terms of what could be done, what could be changed with this bill. We're suggesting a number of very good measures to improve this bill, including, for example, a government commitment to consult with frontline workers and specialists in terms of the programs and measures that would be most efficient to deal with sexual violence, and in terms of the best ways to implement those practices across the country. For example, the government should recognize the need to offer prevention and support services to fight early and forced marriages to the women victim of forced marriages. Those are some very good proposals that were suggested and supported by a wide range of experts at committee. So these are really concrete solutions. Prevention, education. We need to put measures like that in place, and in my opinion, that's just good old-fashioned common sense, and I sincerely hope that the government will decide to support the amendments moved by my colleague from Pierrefonds-Dollard. It being 1:15, pursuant to an order made on Tuesday, June 9, 2015, it is my duty to interrupt deliberation and put to a vote all questions necessary for the disposal of a report stage of this bill.
Madame Blanche.
Ms. Blanchette-Lamotte, seconded by Ms. Sitsabaisen, moved that Bill S7, motion number 1, be amended by deleting the title.
To adopt the motion? All those in favor will please say yea. All those opposed will please say nay. In my opinion, the nays have it. The recorded division on the motion stands deferred. And the recorded division will also apply to motions number 2, 3, 8, and 10. Motion number 4, Ms. May, seconded by, by Mr. Heyer, moved that Bill S7 be amended by deleting Clause 3. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? No. I declare the motion defeated. And I therefore declare motions number 5 to 7, 9, and 11 to 17 defeated as well. Order. Normally at this time the House would proceed to the taking of the deferred recorded division at the report stage of the bill. However, pursuant to Standing Order 45, the recorded division stands deferred until Monday, June 15, 2015 at the ordinary hour of daily adjournment. Accordingly... The good Chief Government Whip is rising on point of order.
Mr. Speaker, if you seek it, I think you'll find agreement to see the clock at 1:30.
Does the Honourable Chief Government Whip have agreement to see the clock? Agreed and so ordered. Accordingly, this House will now proceed to the consideration of private members' business as listed on today's order paper.
Private members' business, resuming debate on motion M574 on small and medium-sized businesses in the name of Mr. Giguère. Resuming debate, the honourable member for Rivière-des-Mille-Îles. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it's a pleasure for me to rise once again to speak to credit card fees imposed on businesses. This is something that I've been working on since 2013 because over the last 4 years I've heard just a huge number of stories of people in my riding who have spoken about these fees, the high interest fees on credit cards and the high fees on small businesses that have to pay exorbitant fees imposed on them by companies like Visa and MasterCard. So today we're talking about fees that are imposed by credit card companies on retailers and businesses when consumers make purchases. So the processing cost for credit card payments in Canada accounts for between 1.5 and 4% of the purchasing cost. In 2012, businesses paid $832 million to offer credit card services to their clients. So, Mr. Speaker, that's not a negligible sum. And it's a heavy burden on small businesses in my riding and across the country. In 2009, the NDP moved a motion in the House of Commons asking the Government of Canada to put in place a bill that would oblige, and that's the key word, that would oblige a mandatory bill to protect Canadians from credit card fees. And unfortunately, despite the fact that the motion was supported by a number of retailer associations across Canada, despite that, the government has still not passed a mandatory a bill that would a mandatory code of conduct for credit card companies. They've just put in place a voluntary code of conduct for the big credit card companies. So the motion that we're debating today, motion M574, asks the government to do two things. First of all, it asks the government to lower the costs for businesses and consumers by reducing transaction fees charged to merchants by the credit card companies. And the motion also asks the government to allow merchants to disclose to the consumer the transaction costs relating to the payment method chosen at the point of sale. And that's very important, Mr. Speaker, because we know that there's, unfortunately, a lack of awareness among consumers. They don't necessarily know that when they use their Visa or MasterCard, that the merchant has to pay exorbitant fees for them to be able to do that. So there's a lack of awareness, unfortunately. And among other things, that's why I launched the campaign in 2013 in my riding of Rivière-des-Mille-Îles to talk about these credit card fees. So what the NDP is calling for is a law that would put a ceiling on those transaction fees. And we've also undertaken consultations across the country to develop a clear position on this subject. Among others, our critic for consumer affairs has traveled across the country and participated in a number of roundtable discussions on this subject. So we have 6 recommendations that came out of those roundtables, and allow me to list them for you. So first of all, the NDP recommends that strict regulations be created concerning electronic payments to establish clear, fair standards for all parties, particularly small and medium-sized businesses, entrepreneurs, and consumers. We also ask that the government fill the gaps in the current government payment governance system to better protect Canadian consumers. Our third recommendation is that we continue to support the Interac payment system, which offers businesses and consumers a safe and economical way to deal with and process electronic payments in Canada. There's not many people who know this, Mr. Speaker, but for every transaction involving an Interac card, there's just one fixed fee that is paid by merchants, and that's just a few cents. So it's much more affordable to use Interac for merchants than credit cards. We are also calling for businesses in Canada, credit card businesses in Canada, to be forced to divulge the fees that are being paid that could have an impact on competitiveness for small businesses. We want consumers to be better educated. We want them to be aware of the practices and the fees that are associated with the use of these cards. We also recommend that consumers be able to see at the point of sale the hidden costs on the merchant related to the use of a payment card. And we want, finally, a better method for conflict resolution for differences of opinion between merchants and financial institutions. So let me speak to the history of this issue and all the recommendations and consultations that have been undertaken in recent years. So, since 2008, over the last 8 years almost, a number of merchant associations, including the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, the Canadian Retail Council, as well as the Small Business Status Coalition, launched lobbying campaigns against the exorbitant fees that credit card companies impose on merchants. So this is a campaign that has been in place across Canada for years. In 2013, the Competition Tribunal noted that the conditions imposed by Visa and MasterCard on Canadian businesses were anti-competitive and that the fees they required were excessive. The tribunal itself called on the government to intervene in the market to fix this problem. And, well, since then, how has the government reacted? Well, they've simply introduced a voluntary code of conduct on the credit card companies, a code which, by the way, doesn't work. And so that is why the Small Business Status Coalition and a number of small business owners that we've spoken with have criticized the measures taken by the government. We need to act, and the government must take serious measures to have a mandatory code of conduct that would limit the exorbitant fees imposed on merchants. We know that the fees paid in Canada are among the highest in the world. The average rate is above 2% in Canada, while it's at 1% in Australia and 0.79% in the United Kingdom. Why is that? Well, Australia and the UK have taken measures to limit transaction fees imposed on merchants for credit card payment. So we know that it's possible to regulate the abusive practices of banks and credit card companies. It's been done elsewhere, but unfortunately, this Conservative majority government is in the pockets of the banks and the big oil companies, and so that's why they don't want to act. They don't want to put in policies that would force them to act. On this side of the House, we want to act to limit the abusive practices of the banks. We also know that by not regulating transaction fees on credit cards, well, that's regressive. A document published in 2009 by the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston estimated that on average every household is transferring $149 a year per household if they use credit cards. There's a regressive transfer of funds, and poor consumers are proportionally paying more than rich consumers for these fees. So in terms of social justice, if we really want to reduce inequality in Canada, well, this would be one way to do that, by putting a ceiling on these credit card transaction fees. In my riding, when I've gone door to door, my constituents have asked me to limit credit card transaction fees. It's important that we put in place measures to protect consumers against the abusive practices of banks, and at the NDP, we will do that when we become the next Government of Canada. Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Rimouski-Nejet, Témiscouata-Lébasque. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it's a pleasure for me to rise in the House to speak to my colleague's motion, my colleague from Marc-Alain Fortin. It's a very appropriate motion. I know that the government's throne speech and even the last couple of budgets from this Conservative government have talked about defending consumers and defending small and medium-sized businesses, but they're a long way from walking the talk. And with the motion in question, we're dealing with a situation that is a problem for all small and medium-sized businesses across Quebec and Canada. That's the question of interchange fees, the transaction fees linked to credit cards, which are paid by businesses. And, Mr. Speaker, these fees are very high in Canada. They're about 1.5%. They can go up to as high as 4%. And 4%, that's on cards where users get points that they can exchange for various benefits or merchandise. And so what is important to realize is these points cards, well, they're to the advantage of consumers, but it's other consumers and businesses who are in effect paying for those points. It's good marketing for the credit card companies, but at the end of the day, it just leads to additional fees which are paid by all consumers and which lead to higher prices than necessary. Now, Mr. Speaker, we've seen in Australia or in the European Union where these fees have been limited. So when you have a small business and your profit margin is maybe 5 or 6%, when credit card fees cost you 1.5 to 4%, well, it becomes very hard for those businesses to survive. And so the only option they have left is to not offer credit card payments. And we know that in today's market, it's very hard to not offer that because a huge number of people use their credit cards for everyday purchases. So it's an option that, well, it might appear to be a solution for these companies, but at the end of the day, it's not realistic because, obviously, somebody who can't pay with a credit card and who's not used to using their debit card or, indeed, cash, is probably just going to take their card and go to another business, a competitor. So, Mr. Speaker, the motion is very appropriate because it affirms the intention of the official opposition when it comes to putting a ceiling on these interchange fees for credit cards. It affirms our intention to no longer follow simply a voluntary code of conduct, which seems to be the favorite of this Conservative government, but to impose real restrictions that will benefit all small and medium-sized businesses, all merchants, and, by extension, all consumers.
The government says that it has already succeeded in dealing with Visa and MasterCard. These are the major companies. So they've said that they have succeeded in dealing with Visa and MasterCard and achieving a certain level. But that's not enough. There are various associations and organizations that represent SMEs and that represent various trade sectors that really still don't know what's going to happen. They don't know when Visa and MasterCard will make any changes. So, Mr. Speaker, what we don't need is a voluntary code. We need regulation on the part of the government, and we could still discuss how that's going to happen, how those regulations could be applied, and what the parameters would be. But what is clear is that the government has a role to play. It has a role to play in various markets, for example, that of credit cards, because what we have in the credit card market is not a free market. We have a duopoly. So we have known players, and there are other companies that haven't managed to necessarily enter that market. So we have this duopoly. And when you have a duopoly, then that's actually a failure of the rules of the marketplace. And so there would be a role to intervene for the purposes of protecting the consumer and protecting industry and trade. So let's look at examples of regulations like this that have been adopted throughout the world. Australia is an interesting example. I'm not necessarily saying that this is the way a new Democrat government would proceed, but it's interesting because there is a ceiling there. There's a ceiling of interchange fees. And it's the Central Bank of Australia that decides on that ceiling. So it's out of the hands of the government, out of the hands of the federal government. That's not a bad thing. It's in the hands of the body that's responsible for managing the monetary policy of that country. So that's an interesting example. And it shows that regulations can be used to intervene. And we have fees that go from 1.5 to 4%, but in Australia, that's gone down significantly. And even the European Union has passed some regulations whose purpose is to set a ceiling of 0.3% for credit card fees charged and 0.5% for debit cards. So when you look at that, what you're seeing is the fact that there is political will in the European Union. So they're looking for a real solution to a real problem. Mr. Speaker, I was giving you the example of Australia. The European Union has just brought its fees down to 0.3%. In Australia, it went down in 2006 to 0.5%. Now, credit card issuers like Visa and MasterCard will say, well, you know, we're going to be on the edge of financial ruin if you do that. We won't be able to work properly if you do that, if you just totally upset the market like this. Well, that's what they said initially in Australia. They were trying to slow down the efforts of the Australian government. And what they were saying was that the consequences could be disastrous. But in fact, Mr. Speaker, the use of credit cards continued to increase after 2006. So there wasn't that turmoil that they were predicting in the credit card market. Companies adapted. They reduced their costs in other areas. And they were able to adapt to this decrease in their revenue, basically. And so that was the Australian government that had intervened. So clearly we have to do something. When I speak to business people in my riding, I see that something has to be done. Now, when I talk to them about interchange fees and the use of credit cards, they have a reaction that's a pretty general reaction. What it's doing really is eating into their finances. And when I talk to them about the New Democrat proposals and when I talk to them about this motion put forward by my colleague from Marc-Aurèle Fortin, they see that we really have a true will to change things. And that's really the best thing that we can do for our business people, for our merchants. That is to be able to enable them to provide services to the community. Because they want to be able to grow, our communities want to grow, and in order to grow their businesses, they need to be able to make future investments. They need to be able to increase their presence on their own, for example, domestic markets and their own market within the community. So that's why they support this NDP proposal, and it's well known. I remember 3 years ago, I was accompanying the member for Kamouraska-Rivière-du-Loup. At the time, he was critic for tourism and SMEs. And we had launched a campaign at the time to raise awareness about SMEs and to make people aware in Quebec and throughout Canada about these issues. At the time, it was the member for Sudbury that was responsible for the campaign throughout the country. And people were very interested. For example, Chambers of Commerce, the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, and other organizations. They were very interested. That was 3 years ago. So there is a need for an implementation of this kind of measure, and that need has existed for a long time. It existed before we launched the campaign, it exists now, and that's why we will continue to promote stricter regulations that reflect this kind of motion from my colleague for Malcorel-Fortin. So it also shows the kind of direction we plan to head in when we will form government in October 2015, because we want to be able to help small and medium-sized businesses. We want to help them grow. We want them to be able to face the various challenges that they will face over time. We want to be able to help them by setting a ceiling on these fees. Resuming debate. Right of reply, the honourable member for Malcorel-Fortin.
For me, the position of the government is a deception, but absolutely not a surprise. Why? Because in this House, you have two sides. One side is the side of the Canada and the Canadian. Is the side of the spirit of Tommy Douglas, a great Canadian. And this Canadian develop one policy to include one, economic development and social solidarity. In the same times, everybody have a job and he have the respect and the help of the state. The other side is the side of a great American losers. The side of this un-Canadian government is motivated by the spirit of George W. Bush, a great loser. Your guys, it's your side. And presently, this un-Canadian government refused to help a small Canadian enterprise. Imagine the result of the un-Canadian government policy is 2% of rate for the credit card in Canada for the small enterprise, and in European Union is 0.3. In Australia is 0.5, a fraction of the present rate. And for this reason, Mr. President, is a clear deception, but absolutely not a surprise. Each time of this un-Canadian government have a chance to sabotage the Canadian economy, he don't lose that. He transformed the Canada in just kingdom of corporate welfare dumps. That's it, that's all. It's your choice. We refuse to help the Canada, and imagine the next election, the Canada vote for a Canadian party. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
La question la suivante.
The question is the following. Mr. Giguère, seconded by the member, moves that in the opinion of the House, small and medium-sized business owners are the driving force of job creation in Canada, and Canadian retailers and merchants pay credit card merchant fees that are among the highest in the world. And therefore, the government should take immediate steps to make the cost of living more affordable for the middle class by A, lowering costs for businesses and consumers by reducing transaction fees charged to merchants, and B, allowing merchants to disclose to the consumer the transaction costs relating to the payment method chosen at the moment of the sale. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion?
All those in favour will please say yea.
Way!
All those opposed will please say nay. In my opinion, the yeas have it. Pursuant to Standing Order 93, the Recorded Division stands deferred until Wednesday, June 17, 2015, immediately before the time provided for private members' business. It being 1:42, this House stands adjourned until next Monday at 11 a.m. pursuant to Standing Order 24.1.
At this point, I'm going to add my thyme. Just add the sprigs. You don't even need to chop it. If you have some in the garden, snip, snip. Perfect. So again, stir. My rice, heat it up. It's toasty. It's well coated. My liquid. Coconut milk. Huh? I love coconut. I love coconut anywhere. Nice, rich texture. So I'm going to add 1.25 cups of water, okay? And I'm going to add 1.75 cups of coconut milk. So that's going to give me my ratio 1:2. This one is not sweetened. Keep the sweetened one for the pina coladas. Huh? And the water. That goes right in there. So we just want to stir all this together. Simple enough up to now, right, guys? So stir this. And last but not least, we're going to add the pigeon peas. They're actually beans, okay? But because of their size, we call them peas. And they're really traditional in rice and peas, okay? So we're going to add these. So it's going to be nice and creamy. The coconut is going to be, gives it a nice creamy texture. And it's going to balance out the spice from the jerk chicken. So once all that's mixed up, cover it, simmer for 20 minutes. So forget about it for 20 minutes, okay? While that's simmering, I'm going to get my chicken that's been marinating in the fridge. Smells good. I have a hot grill, nice and oiled, so your barbecue get it nice and hot. Oil your grill. And we're just going to add our chicken to our grill. Don't we love that sound? Huh? Perfect. So that's going to go in there, right on the grill. It smells fabulous. So I'll keep putting my chicken on the grill, and I've been telling you all about the layers of spicy, savory, and sweet flavors in today's menu. Well, after the break, we're going to be making the sweet component. It's a new salad recipe for you. Don't change the channel.
Coming this summer to CBC, Championship Show Jumping from the International Ring at Spruce Meadows. CBC, your home for all the show jumping events.
Dear Poise, women are using period pads for pee.
When Poise pads with super absorbent material are 3 times drier.
What if women took those period pads and turned them
into something awesome?
How would you recycle yours? Check out our new Thin Shape pads at poise.com.
Stop spending hundreds of dollars on those disposable wet and dry pads and never touch dirty water again. Introducing the amazing Instamop, the self-wringing mop that spins at an incredible speed to cut your cleaning time in half. The Instamop can be used on multiple floor surfaces, and the Instamop cleans up all those everyday messes in an instant. The 360-degree swivel design allows you to clean along baseboards, into corners and tight spaces, even around tables and chairs. No more cleaning with the same dirty water. The Instamop has unique dual bucket technology that keeps your clean water clean and dirty water separate.
Available at these fine retailers.
This season's top trend, loose waves. How do we get it?
New Tresemme Perfectly Undone Waves. With sea kelp extract infuses hair with texture for natural-looking waves.
The secret to loose, effortless waves.
New Tresemme Perfectly Undone Waves. Professional at your fingertips.
Getaways. Birthdays. One of those days. Potholes. Mud holes. Even bleep holes. People on their phones. Epic storms. And bug swarms. There are many reasons we make the Subaru Impreza the way we do.
If you've ever considered getting a walk-in tub, we have great news.
No more cold seats. For a limited time, when you purchase a Safe Step walk-in tub, we'll upgrade your order to include our newest feature, a heated seat.
That's a $600 value. Free.
But that's not all. The new and improved dual hydrotherapy system now has foot massaging jets to help soothe aching feet.
And a microbubble jet that produces bubbles so small they can penetrate pores to help remove dirt and toxins, leaving your skin ultra soft. And as always, Safe Step walk-in tubs are built to maximize safety so you can stay in your home and enjoy the comforts of bathing again.
Call the number on your screen now for more information and a free, no-obligation consultation.
Our new walk-in tub is affordable and could change your life.
Call 1-800-NEW-TUBS or log on to safestepptubs.ca.
Critics agree.
After laughing.
After laughing.
I think, another dinner.
You'll need another dinner. Still Standing premieres June 23rd on CBC.
We're taking a trip to the sunny south today and cooking up a tasty Caribbean menu. Now it's time to flip our jerk chicken. Look at this, guys. That's what we want. A little bit of charring. Perfect. If we want, we can keep basting this, okay? Depends on how spicy you want it. Our rice. Look at that. So all the liquids absorbed. There might be a little more underneath. So what I want to do is I just want to take this off the heat. I'm going to let it rest for about 10 minutes. And then using a fork, I'm going to just fluff it up. Fluff it up. Fluff it up. Now I'm going to make one of my favorite salads. This mango cabbage slaw is quick, colorful, and sweet. And we want some sweet to balance out the spicy chicken and the savory rice. It's a great alternative to your regular coleslaw. So what I'm starting with here is cabbage, okay? Love cabbage. You can get it anytime. And honestly, at my house, we probably eat some kind of coleslaw once a week, okay? Everybody loves it. So to this, we're going to add some carrots that we just shredded. Okay, so some shredded carrots in here, really for the color. Again, a little sweet, the carrots. And a bit of red onion. So we just took some red onion and we sliced it, okay? So we're going to just break that up, put that in there. Now, the real kicker here is the mango. So, I have a mango. You want something nice and ripe, but you still want it to be a little firm. We peeled it. So what we want to do now is just slice both sides, follow the pit, slice around. This is how I do it at home. And when I get to this point, I probably have my daughter say, "Daddy, can I have the rest?" So then, we just want to cut this up in cubes. So this is really going to be the nice sweet component to this salad. So put that in. Everybody is going to love this salad. And again, this is jerk chicken night, right? But it could be any night, this salad. Okay? You can even grill some regular chicken and put it in the slaw. Okay? So put the mango in here. I'm going to check my chicken just to make sure. So again, with the jerk chicken, we just want to flip it, you know, every now and then. But it looks good. Give it some nice color everywhere. This is going to be fantastic. Remember, if you're going to keep basting it, you have to cook your marinade, okay, guys? So we're just going to make sure that we get a nice char on every side. Now, for our slaw, we'll see if we need more mango, but we need to make a dressing, okay? So I'm going to start. A little bit of vegetable oil. Mayo. Add a little bit of mayo. 2 tablespoons. I'm going to eyeball this. A little bit of honey. Cider vinegar. Perfect. And I have about a tablespoon of my jerk marinade. So I'm going to put that in. I saved it, so we're going to put that in. This marinade hasn't touched the chicken. Okay? And we mix all this together. Use a whisk. It's easier. So it's a nice creamy dressing. Nice creamy coleslaw. We like that. Put that in here. We don't want to put too much. That's great. You want to mix this up. So this is going to complement our chicken perfectly. Okay, it's really going to balance out the spice. So once all that's mixed up, easy, you just want to plate it. Okay, and we're going to go family style or party style, backyard party style. Nice big platter. If you want more mango, add more mango. Guests are happy, they want to come over, right? Toasted cashew nuts, a little bit on the top. And we're going to finish with a little bit of cilantro. Rough chop, just put that on the top here. And we're good. When we come back, we'll plate our meal and get ready for the beach with a refreshing pineapple rum punch. Stick around.
Check it out. The Apple Watch is here. iPhone to Apple Watch. Award-winning CBC News alerts on the go with our iOS 8 Ready app. Download it from the App Store today.
Walmart's changing. Discover another side, a fresher side, with our variety of Canada #1 grade fruits and vegetables.
Aw, she's eating her fruit. At least she's still eating her fruit.
Quality you can taste. 100% satisfaction guaranteed. Or your money back. Walmart.
Stop spending hundreds of dollars on those disposable wet and dry pads and never touch dirty water again. Introducing the amazing Instamop, the self-wringing mop that spins at an incredible speed to cut your cleaning time in half. The Instamop can be used on multiple floor surfaces, and the Instamop cleans up all those everyday messes in an instant. The 360-degree swivel design allows you to clean along baseboards, into corners and tight spaces, even around tables and chairs. No more cleaning with the same dirty water. The Instamop has unique dual bucket technology that keeps your clean water clean and dirty water separate.
Available at these fine retailers.
Getaways. Birthdays. One of those days. Potholes. Mud holes. Even bleep holes. People on their phones. Epic storms. And bug swarms. There are many reasons we make the Subaru Impreza the way we do.
If you've ever considered getting a walk-in tub, we have great news.
No more cold seats. For a limited time, when you purchase a Safe Step walk-in tub, we'll upgrade your order to include our newest feature, a heated seat.
That's a $600 value. Free.
But that's not all. The new and improved dual hydrotherapy system now has foot massaging jets to help soothe aching feet.
And a microbubble jet that produces bubbles so small they can penetrate pores to help remove dirt and toxins, leaving your skin ultra soft. And as always, Safe Step walk-in tubs are built to maximize safety so you can stay in your home and enjoy the comforts of bathing again.
Call the number on your screen now for more information and a free, no-obligation consultation.
Our new walk-in tub is affordable and could change your life.
Call 1-800-NEW-TUBS or log on to safesteptubs.ca.
Hey everybody, it's Stephen and Chris, and this is CBC Ottawa. Thanks for watching.
Super flavorful Caribbean dinner in the kitchen today. I've made some island rice and peas, a mango and cabbage slaw, and our jerk chicken is ready to come off the grill. Doesn't it smell amazing, guys? So, I fluffed my rice. This is easy. Grab some rice or put it on a platter. You're going to put some rice on a plate. Just like that. It smells fantastic. We have some of our chicken. Maybe 2 pieces, huh? Because we're hungry. And some of our slaw, just to cool off our palate. There you go. Now that's a good plate. Color, hey? Bit of lime. Some of your guests want. Listen, if you serve this at a backyard barbecue, people are going to want to come back over and over and over again. So make sure you like them. So this, there you go. All right, how does that look? You guys want to taste some of this? I'll give you some after the show. But first, is it hot in here or is it just me? How about a pineapple rum punch to help us cool off? Huh? It has a refreshing combination of tangy lime, sweet pineapple, and spicy rum. And it's a good one to throw together when you're entertaining because you can make a big batch and everyone helps themselves. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, guys. That's the combination. So we're doing 1 part sour lime juice. So that goes in the pitcher. 2 parts sweet, simple syrup. So that's about double the lime. So we're going to put that in there. 3 parts rum, simple syrup, mixture, water, sugar. Okay, equal parts. Rum, 3 parts. The whole bottle. Huh? Bingo. Nice dark rum, better flavor. 4 parts pineapple juice. So that goes in here. You can never go wrong with the 1, 2, 3, 4 system here, guys, when you're making punch, okay? Perfect. Mix that up. Pour it in the glass. Pineapple. There you go. For all the recipes we made today, check out our website. Hope you get in the kitchen and cook up some fun. See you next time. Cheers.